Well, hello there. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Simba's Twin, The Lion King, Part 12. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Documentary, Episode 6, Name, Dr. T. Soma Tunsun. Role, Lead Researcher. It was past halfway through the dry season in the Serengeti. It was not nearing the end of the dry season, but the land was getting there. The region was in its driest state yet due to the unrelenting heat and the lack of moisture. This was often referred to as the final leg of the yellow season. Dr. Tunsun began the episode with his voiceover over the footage of the savannah. Every animal was in a dire state. The lakes had shrunk to their tiniest state yet, and water was a resource every creature searched for and fought for. But during this time, there was one creature, one predator, that was searching for something, but it was not food or water, Dr. Tunsun said. The aerial shot transitions perfectly to footage taken from the ground. There, a lioness was shown, healthy but not ridiculously muscular or big, so it was easy to tell she was not from Leo's pride. A lioness searching for a pride, Dr. Tunsun said, the camera focusing on the lioness as she searched for scents on the ground. It was not unheard of for a lioness to leave her pride in search of a new one where she could get a better position. And lionesses often leave their pride at the end of their pregnancy and early motherhood to protect their vulnerable cubs from the father, Dr. Tunsun said. But the lioness you see here was doing neither. She was searching for an old friend, perhaps her long-lost lover, he said. Whatever she was searching for, she had shown incredible determination and resilience. After all, she had been traveling all over the Serengeti for over a month now. At first, we pitied her, thinking she was a lioness searching for a new pride, and the Serengeti had only one due to the sheer dominance Leo had put on the land. We thought she was a lioness that couldn't find a new home, he said. We were wrong. The camera focused on Nala as she moved towards a location after getting a new scent. There was purpose in her steps. She was not an animal that was simply trying to survive, she was living for more. What we are seeing is a living, breathing piece of Leo's past, Dr. Tunsun revealed. The camera cut scenes to Leo, who was patrolling as usual. The audience could already tell what he was doing. Lions did not have much variety in their schedule after all, not even Leo. It was patrol, fight, eat, mate, patrol and sleep. Over and over and over again. But Leo suddenly stopped. His head lifted up and his nose twitched to take in the new scent. A low growl left his throat as his eyes narrowed. He looked around but quickly focused on a certain direction where the scent came from. We've always wondered where Leo came from. What was his past before he came to the Serengeti? How did he lose his tail? How was he kicked out? Does he even have a family, or was he this unholy abomination that God had put in the Serengeti just for shits and giggles? Dr. Tunsun said, joking at the last part. Well, we are about to find out. Because you know what? Leo's past had caught up to him. A past he was trying to run away from all this time, he said. The next scenes of the documentary focused on showing instead of telling. The camera shifted scenes as Leo and the lioness began moving towards each other, and at a rapid pace too. Fitting music and a soundtrack were used to highlight the tension in this scene. Soon enough, the lioness found herself in a tight position. She was backed into a rocky hill with no escape behind her. And from the footage of the drone, you could see Leo's enormous body circling around her between the yellow trees and bushes. It looked dangerous. It looked like he was hunting her like he did to countless challengers. After a bit of studying, he went out of the clearing and met the lioness face to face. They were standing far apart, but they were still close enough to examine each other. Then there was a long moment of silence. Dr. Tunsun's voice finally resounded through the footage once again. At the time, we could admit it. But we all knew, at least a part of us did. We just never believed that such a romantic and dramatic love story could happen between two animals. But After a long moment, well over a minute of deep examination, Leo took the first step towards the lioness. But the lioness moved, launching herself so incredibly fast at Leo. The audience braced for impact. Because, from the looks of it, the lioness was attacking Leo. But nothing could prepare the viewers for what happened next. The lioness succeeded in taking down Leo. She charged straight at Leo, and after hitting him, Leo fell on his back with a deep thud. A Lion King, whom they were all too familiar with to be unbeatable and ruthless, was tackled to the ground by a smaller lioness. They could count the hundreds of corpses that tried and failed to take him down like that. But the fight never came after the tackle. The two beasts took a pause, and the lioness simply lay in the embrace of the king. It looked emotional and, quite frankly, romantic, as Dr. Tunsun just mentioned. It was the reunion of long-lost lovers, Dr. Tunsun declared. The footage zoomed in on their interaction. How they were licking each other's faces and touching each other's noses like they were kissing each other. The affection they showed each other was shocking. They had never seen Leo being so soft or gentle towards his own lionesses. The music and the soundtrack had an abrupt change too. From one that created tension to a melody that movies would play in a montage where love bloomed. The documentary began following that same format as well. It was ridiculous. The audience was watching a documentary that felt more like a movie. After the reunion, Leo did not separate or try to return to his pride. His pride was completely forgotten, his challenges and duty thrown right out the window. Instead, the two lions began moving around the Serengeti, extremely playful at times and always touching their heads every few minutes like they couldn't get enough from each other. Last episode, the audience saw Leo as a cold-blooded killer who was extremely territorial and slew every challenger that dared enter his kingdom. Now they saw him as a loverboy so entrapped by a female. The contrast was honestly ridiculous. It was enough for the people to look at the title and make sure they watched the same documentary. Leo had never been so fun and playful. He climbed trees, he played something akin to hide and seek and was always initiating contact and affection. In his pride, the females had to initiate every contact and do everything to earn his attention. But here he was, showering a lioness they never saw before with love. Eventually, the two came to a buffalo herd and Leo took down one for a meal. He gave the lioness the best seat possible as he showed off and took down the buffalo. For the viewers who had seen him hunt countless times, it was easy to tell the flair with which he hunted. It was obvious he was trying to impress the female, and some could not help but facepalm and laugh fondly at it all. To make it all worse, Leo actually let the female have the first bite and let her eat the organs, which were usually strictly reserved for him. He was gentle and kind, nothing like they had ever seen before. And when the sun set and night began, Leo did not leave to go back to his pride. Instead, he pulled the lioness under him and spent the night with her. I can imagine the shock you all may feel at this moment. But think for an instant how flabbergasted we were as researchers when we saw this. We had no knowledge of who this lioness was or what she meant to Leo yet. And our heads were filled with questions as we were shocked with everything he did for her, Dr. Tunsun said. But in the following months we will find answers to everything, he said. The scene captured the two lions sleeping together and also added the background of the moon and the stars that were clearly visible in the dry season without rain clouds. It was, without a doubt, better than most trashy romance that comes out these days. The lioness, which we named Nala, did not only come to reunite with her lover. She came here with a purpose, seeking Leo to help her from the events that were plaguing their home, he said. In this part of the story, Leo was undoubtedly the hero. A hero that must face his past and finally bring peace to the chaos he left behind, Dr. Tunsun said. Nala was here to take Leo back home, Dr. Tunsun revealed, and the footage panned out. The sound of chaos and the future conflict that was going to happen soon played out like a foreshadowing. The audience could hear the laughter of hyenas, the screams of hyenas, and the growls of lions seemingly at war. A crooked roar, and finally, a roar so loud that it was unmistakably Leo's victory roar. Third POV, the documentary continued covering Nala and Leo in the morning. Leo finally remembered about his pride and went back with Nala behind him. The introduction went along and Nala was welcomed to the pride. All the lionesses were curious to get to know this lioness who seemed to have stolen Leo's heart in one day. Contrary to our expectation, there was no tension when Nala arrived. She was welcomed, seemingly without any blood, which probably had to do with Leo and how he always maintained an iron rule over the pride, Dr. Tunsan said. The whole day was spent with Nala and the pride getting to know each other. Meanwhile, Leo followed his usual routine and patrolled in the afternoon. But even in his absence, no one was trying to do anything to the new member of the pride. After Leo returned, he spent the night with Nala once more. This time, they even went as far as doing the deed. Leo mated with Nala on that very night. This is another proof that the two knew each other before. No matter how irresistible Leo was to females, it is simply not possible for a lioness to spread her legs that fast for a male. But personally, I suspect that there was a higher motive from Nala. She wanted and, quite frankly, needed Leo to return back home and fix the trouble that has been plaguing her old pride, Dr. Tunsan said. And Leo did not waste any time because on the very next day, the pride made their way south to the Serengeti. Which completely contradicted their usual travel around the Serengeti, he said. Leo was leaving the Serengeti to return home, and miraculously, his whole pride followed him. Usually, if a lion king decides to leave the territory, he forfeits the pride too. But that was not the case for his pride, as they followed him like loyal subjects. The documentary followed the 2-day travel of the pride. They were moving towards the south, where it was even harsher than the central or the northern Serengeti. They were not stopping like they did as a nomadic pride, instead, they were constantly moving other than taking time to sleep. This was an obvious clue that they were traveling somewhere, not just moving inside their territory. In 2 days, the pride reached the southern edge of the Serengeti. But of course this wouldn't be a Leo documentary without some killing and badass fights now and then, he said. The camera turned to 5 lions moving toward Leo and his pride during the darkness of the night. A coalition of 5 lions that had been hiding in the less visited southern Serengeti. Leo in his journey inevitably had to pass them. The coalition, thinking they finally got the golden opportunity, decided to strike in the night. But of course our drone was not the only one in the sky, he said, and the scene cuts to Grim flying towards Leo to inform him about this attack. Comments, Victor Mendez, bro. I came here to watch lions fight and now I'm emotionally invested in a long-distance relationship between 2 giant murder cats. Leo really went from Demon King to Disney Prince in 0.2 seconds. Not that important, I swear this documentary has more plot twists than the entire MCU. Also me when Nala tackled Leo. Oh, she dead. Nala cuddles him. Never mind, she won the whole game. Sean Lewis, the fuzz really made him climb a whole tree like a baby. She must be quite special. JTSSE, I swear to God he never does all that when hunting a buffalo. But I guess you gotta add the flair for the fair lady. Ken Jenkins, bro was quick to stuff her. I respect that. Zane Pope, imagine being one of Leo's lionesses watching him suddenly become the softest man alive for a stranger. I'd be like, sir? Sir, do we exist? Dre Lauderdale, 5 lions and a buffalo to Aura Farm. We can't let him keep getting away with this. Kaisel, the collation was the best wingman. I got you, now impress your lady type of energy. They gave their life for the act too. Dino Vermeulen, I really wish I could see their backstory. I really want to know how he lost his tail or how these two were lovers. I don't think they are lovers, though, they'd be cubs when they know each other. It doesn't make sense. Iman. I laughed out loud when they played the romantic music. The production team for this is so goat. They don't give a damn about trying to sound smart or formal. Saul Aguilar Luna, now I shall witness the rise of Wattpad stories about a billionaire alpha male lion and his long-lost lover. Carlos Gabriel Yenex Lopez, I understand you, Leo. She is kinda hot. Reply, we must take away your freedom of speech. You are abusing it. Third POV, name, Dr. T. Soma Tansun. Role, lead researcher. After the vulture warned Leo of the upcoming attack, the king stood up lazily like a worker forced to work. He walked over his pride and headed towards where the attackers came from. The rest of the pride just flopped back down, being assured that if the king was on the move, whatever threat may exist was soon to die. Only Nala followed behind Leo to check out the dangers. And so the two parties met. Leo confronted the five-lion coalition that was trying to take a shot at the throne of the Serengeti. It's funny, really, at this point Leo looked all too done with the bullshit of his fellow males, Dr. Tunsun said with a chuckle. The two groups stood in silence. The challengers, tense and waiting for the enemy to make the first move. Leo, on the other hand, simply looked irritated. It seemed he had no intention of making the first move. He was not the challenger here. The challengers, the five lions that teamed up to kill one, had no choice but to make the first move. Then the attack began. Two lions lunged at Leo first. They had enough distance to build up momentum and they slammed on the king with every inch of their strength. Contrary to how Nala was able to tackle Leo on the ground, these lions were not able to put him down at all. Leo bore the brunt of their charge in a few steps. The lunge came to a stop abruptly, like they slammed into an immovable object. Nevertheless, the lions continued their attack. Their claws raked at his hide and their jaws clamped onto his mane as they desperately tried to reach the neck beneath. But their attacks meant nothing. Leo plowed through them without slowing, as if they were made of cotton candy rather than flesh and bone. These young lions, made of soft bone and not even reaching their prime years, were nothing. Leo's strategy was simple, Dr. Tunsun explained. In a multiple opponent fight, you don't fight all of them. You kill one immediately. Reduce their numbers. Remove their advantage. Leo's eyes locked onto one lion, the smallest and most inexperienced. The young lion tried to defend himself by rising on his hind legs. He swung two heavy paws at Leo, but Leo briskly dodged one and tanked the other without breaking stride. The lion attempted to lunge forward, jaw open wide, fangs ready to clamp down. But Leo's paw slammed onto his skull first. The documentary slowed as Leo rose on his hind legs, towering over them all. The challengers reached 6 or 7 feet in this stance. Leo reached 10. His claws raked across the lion's forehead, stunning him. The blow forced the lion's head down, leaving the top of the skull exposed. Leo's jaws crashed down. His teeth punched through flesh and bone like daggers. He clamped harder. The lion shrieked, thrashing in a wild scramble, but Leo held him down effortlessly, overpowering his smaller frame with terrifying ease. That was when the rest of the lions moved in to attack. But they came ill-prepared. Their numerical advantage meant little when they were in a group and could not attack all at once. Rather, they got in each other's way. The 4 other lions tried to inflict damage on Leo while he mauled the other. But their jaws only clamped down on a handful of mane and their claws tore skin but never did anything vital. It was like trying to eat a boulder. He didn't bother defending, Dr. Tunsun said. Leo trusted his bulk and strength. He knew those wounds would never be enough to stop him. The thrashing of one lion continued for 10 brutal seconds before it faded. The lion went limp and Leo dropped the lifeless body, the skull visibly crushed. 20 seconds, Dr. Tunsun narrated. That was all Leo needed to kill the first challenger. What despair to start the battle. The fact that Leo left himself wide open caused a psychological effect on this lion. Although if they pushed a little more, they would finally damage Leo. But in that instance, he was just unbeatable in their eyes. The clearing fell silent. 4 lions remained, but their eyes were wide. In one swift kill, Leo had broken their confidence. Leo spat blood and fur to the side, then grinned at them with red-stained teeth. He examined himself briefly. Their attacks had caused damage, but not enough to be taken seriously. Those young bloods had no idea what they were getting into, Dr. Tunsun said in a solemn tone. Leo stood still for a moment, taking a breath. The burst of explosive strength had cost him stamina. He still needed to kill 4 more lions, while they only had to kill 1. The disadvantage was massive, but he remained calm. His gaze shifted toward a familiar lion with a scar. The enemies were simply shell-shocked. Afraid to be the next one to die. Leo had made it clear that he would focus on one, and that broke whatever teamwork they were willing to do. The fight resumed with terrifying speed. This was because Leo made the first move. Leo smashed into one lion, knocking him onto his back. The documentary captured the dust exploding beneath them as Leo's massive paws pinned him down. The lion screeched and tried to scramble away, but Leo tore open his underbelly with one brutal swipe and sank his jaws into the intestines that spilled out. The raw footage caused the audience to wince. This lion was dealt death even faster than the first one. Their broken confidence was clear. Leo moved to the next victim. The third lion tried to protect himself by crouching low, keeping his vulnerable stomach against the ground. He refused to stand, huddled like a turtle hiding in its shell. Leo leapt high. The camera froze on Leo's airborne silhouette before he crashed onto the lion with all 400 kilograms of muscle. The sound of impact echoed. Bones cracked. Leo did it again. The lion's spine snapped. Broken ribs punched into his lungs. He suffocated almost instantly. Within minutes, only 2 lions remained. The fight dragged on longer this time. Jafari lunged desperately, but Leo bit off his tail in one violent motion and tore apart the delicate organs beneath. Jafari collapsed, bleeding out quickly. They never stood a chance, did they? The exchange continued, but their attacks were never met with success. Meanwhile, Leo's every movement was precise and tore brutal holes in their body. Then only 1 lion remained. He was bleeding everywhere, with patches of skin missing and muscle exposed. His hind leg was broken, forcing him into a sitting position. Leo wasn't unscathed either. His lips bled. Claw marks streaked across his shoulders and sides. But none of his wounds were deep. All superficial. His bones were intact. His muscles were undamaged. The last lion simply stared at him, hollow-eyed. Leo approached slowly. The battle was practically over because there was no spirit left to fight. An abled body did not equate to an abled spirit. The last lion did not bother fighting and simply lay down in surrender. But there was no more mercy in the king. The dry season had caused his patience to run dry. Leo bit the back of his neck and shook his head sharply. Once, twice, thrice, he did not stop until the spine snapped with a brutal crunch. It was over. Leo took a few minutes to rest before heading back to the only female that came with him. He pulled Nala under him and sheathed himself in her. The king enjoyed the victory in all his capability. The next morning the Pride continued their journey. Leo was wounded, but after a few sessions of grooming, he was good to go. He fought a battle against 5 lions, but he did not even take a break. Everyone now prayed for whatever was waiting on the other side of his journey. The Pride made a very subtle but interesting change in their journey. Lions were built for speed and bursts of strength, not stamina. So a long journey under the sun would slow them down. They created the strategy of journeying during the cool night instead, Dr. Tunsun said. The documentary showed the Pride traveling in the night. They moved during the darkness and slept in the daytime instead. Due to this, they reached their destination in under 2 weeks, Dr. Tunsun said. The documentary cuts to the scene of the whole Pride standing still and looking up at a gigantic plateau. Leo, specifically, looked at that with emotion in his eyes. The drone flew into the sky and showed the plateau and the land below. And here we are, Leo's origin was about to be revealed to us in all its unbelievable truths, Dr. Tunsan said. Comments, James Bristow, sometimes, I wish these animals had a way of long communication. Maybe then they would stop committing what is basically suicide. Eternally heartless, it's the same formula again and again. They think they have a chance. Not that I mind, it's kind of funny. Like a very dark joke. Kaisel, are they keeping tabs on all the death? At this point Leo will erase his whole species. Or only his descendants will live and we will have inbred lions. Job Destin, nature is cruel. It's not Leo's fault either for killing those that challenge him. Jose. Leo is being extra brutal here. Perfectly reflect his impatience and the need to impress. Tyrant 44, new mythical card unlocked. Leo with his Hasnala. You don't want to be at the other end of that. Lucas_King 13, the ball slayer slew another ball. I can't even hate it, game is game. Mangai_Mar, I have a theory that Leo's high testosterone is caused by the plethora of balls he had snatched. Franco, imagine surviving Leo but you came out without balls. What's the point of living anymore? The Reading Wizard, the lion with the scar fought Leo before. If you don't believe me, check out this link. ThekingsArchive.com.vid, Rayizer, wait, if Leo leaves the Serengeti, what will happen to his kingdom? Will other kings rise while he is away? Surprise, if they had waited a bit more instead of attacking, they could potentially rule the Serengeti while Leo is away. Third POV, name, Dr. T. Soma Tunsan. Role, lead researcher. Although all these discoveries were made way later in the future, we will insert all the important information here before Leo actually began making his moves after reaching his destination. Dr. Tunsan continued, the documentary that was reaching halfway to the end. You are quite lucky, I would say. Because you wouldn't go into these events completely blind like we were, Dr. Tunsan said. The drone footage of the Serengeti continued to play as Dr. Tunsan's voice sounded over the footage. But soon, the aerial scene began moving rapidly towards the south, following the path that Leo and his pride took in their travel. Let me introduce you to Leo's origin, where he was born and where he was raised, Dr. Tunsan said, and the footage slowed until it paused on the perfect scene from the sky. The footage was taken from a high altitude, showing the vastness of the savanna and the huge plateau that was situated in the distance. Lazy clouds also moved in bulk right above the plateau. It looked like a paradise from this distance. Behold, the Pridelands, Dr. Tunsan said. The documentary began showing the plateau and its surroundings while Dr. Tunsan went into a monologue. This part of the documentary felt like a proper documentary to the audience. Stretching across the transitional belt between northern and central Tanzania lies a landform unlike the surrounding plains. Elevated, emerald, and ecologically distinct, the Pridelands stand as a testament to how geography alone can carve an entirely separate world from the biome directly below it, Dr. Tunsan explained. The Pridelands was a titanic plateau located roughly 200 miles, around 320 kilometers, south of the Serengeti. This plateau exists at the convergence of several key African ecoregions. The Eastern Arc-influenced highlands, the northern savanna transition zone, and the rift-adjacent volcanic terrain that shapes much of Tanzania's topographic character. As a result, the Pridelands form a microcosm, an ecosystem with its own rhythm, hydrology, and evolutionary pressures, different enough to influence the behavior and morphology of the predators that call it home, Dr. Tunsan said. This is a very unique land and, quite frankly, undiscovered until then, was where Leo's story began. It was the land of his origin. The drone entered the Pridelands and began taking video of the paradise-like land. It was clear that the footage was taken way after Leo defeated Scar and the land had recovered. It was in its most abundant phase. After years of studying and with the help of many famous geologists, geomorphologists, and other scientists, we finally got close to understanding what this plateau meant to the ecosystem and how it came to be. The landscape of Tanzania is heavily shaped by the East African Rift System, a vast tectonic seam running from the Red Sea through Ethiopia and down toward Mozambique. The Pridelands Plateau exists along the periphery of this system, uplifted over millions of years due to rifting, magmatic intrusion, and gradual fault block rising. What emerges from this geological history is a land elevated substantially above the surrounding savanna, anywhere from 1,400 to 1,800 meters above sea level, creating conditions more reminiscent of montane grassland than the endless lowland plains, Dr. Tunsun explained. The documentary began shifting from a CGI visual of what Dr. Tunsun was explaining to the end result of today. This gave a clear example and demonstration to the viewers so even the most uneducated audience could grasp the concept of what was being said. The soil composition of this plateau provides further clues to its origins. Rich in volcanic ash, basaltic minerals, and weathered rift debris, the plateau's ground retains water better than the Serengeti's shallow, iron-rich soils. This higher retention capacity is a primary reason for the greenery that defines the Pridelands. Even during Tanzania's harsh dry season, the plateau sustains patches of moisture, giving rise to grass species that grow taller, denser, and more nutrient-rich than their lowland counterparts, Dr. Tunsun said. The altitude alone dramatically reshapes the climate of the plateau. At 1,500 meters, average temperatures drop by approximately 6 to 10 degrees compared to the lowlands. This cooling effect slows evaporation, preserves morning dew, and supports plant communities unable to survive the scorching heat of the plains. The Pridelands also benefit from orographic rainfall, a process where moisture-laden air from the Indian Ocean is forced upward by elevated terrain. As the air rises, it cools, condenses, and falls as rain, leaving the plateau with higher annual precipitation than adjacent regions. While the Serengeti itself receives around 500 to 1,000 millimeters depending on location, the Pridelands easily surpass that with 1,200 to 1,400 millimeters, bordering on conditions of dry montane forest ecosystems. All these factors contributed to making the Pridelands as close to paradise as possible. Green all year round, with native prey that did not have to migrate at all. Our earlier suspicion of Leo coming from a land with abundant food and prey was proven true. It could not get better than this. It was no wonder that Leo was as big as he was when we first encountered him. Nature-themed music began playing as the documentary showed the beautiful scenery of the plateau. It captured the vast and different prey animals that were residents of this land. It showed cubs chasing each other in a playful manner. It also showed the plethora of birds that flew above the plateau. From the rhinos, the tall giraffes and the titanic elephants, all animals were living in this land. After the minute-long montage, Dr. Tunsun's voice resounded once more. Now you know the Pridelands. But when we first discovered this land, our impression was quite different. Rewind the time back 10 years prior, to the era of Scar's rule, he said. And then the footage did an abrupt transition. From the greenery that looked like paradise on Earth, it turned into what could only be described as hell. The green of the land turned to the color of ash. The bright blue sky turned dim, with the white clouds disappearing to show a red sky. The abundant animal life in the region turned into crooked bones on the ground. And the lakes and watering holes turned into mud lakes and muddy puddles that looked too toxic to even drink. The change was abrupt and shocking. It was hard to wrap your head around that this was the same land just in a different time period. And the one responsible for this horrible change, Dr. Tunsun said, and the footage cut to Scar. An ugly and crooked lion that lay on the top of the Pride Rock amid a floor of bones. His fur was uneven due to the many scar tissues on his body. One of his eyes was blind, and he was the color of ash with a dark mane. One look and you could tell easily why he was named Scar. After deep research on the case, we have a pretty good idea of what happened in this land and the events that took place to shape Leo as he is. The lion you are seeing now, Scar, is Leo's direct relative. It was his uncle. And also, the murderer of Leo's biological father, Dr. Tunsun revealed dramatically. Here is the most accepted theory of Leo's past. Nothing can be proven unless we create a time machine and witness the past, but this theory has no holes in logical events. So here is what we think happened. Dr. Tunsun began. Once upon a time, there was a king, a great king, might I add. And this king was Leo's father. Judging from the excellent and quite extraordinary genes that Leo inherited from him, it could be speculated that the father was a remarkable lion. He ruled over this secluded ecosystem as the absolute king along with the one directly below him, his brother Scar, he said. The Pride Land was, as mentioned, very secluded, so there were virtually no constant challengers from his kingdom. This caused Leo's father to be careless. And when he least expected it, betrayal came from his blood. Scar, Leo's uncle, murdered his own brother in cold blood due to envy and the desire to rule the paradise all for himself. He went on a rampage, killing the cubs, the siblings of Leo. Which explains why there were very few blood-related siblings among the Pride when Leo returned. But Leo became the one to escape this tragedy. But not without being crippled. It is widely accepted that Leo got all his scars and even lost his tail to Scar when he attempted to kill him as a cub, Dr. Tunsun said. The documentary focused on Leo and his lack of tail. It also showed the footage the researchers had taken in his earlier days. The plethora of scars under his fur made one wonder about the difficult life he must have had even though he was so young. So what we are witnessing and about to witness is a story of revenge. Of a son that avenged his father and a lion that would avenge his past, Dr. Tunsun said. But before we get back to that, let us take a look at Scar. The lion that killed his own brother and brought the prosperous land to the edge of becoming a wasteland. Third POV, name, Dr. T. Soma Tunsun role, lead researcher, Scar, the rugged lion king of the Pride Lands. He was the worst king, but still, he was king. And he had inside him the quality and trait that put him in that position, Dr. Tunsun said. Although this specific trait would be his downfall and would lead to the decline of his kingdom, he said. Scar wasn't just a lion king that ruled over his pride and territory. No, he was the king of something else too. Scar, the king of hyenas. The documentary cut to the scene of Scar standing atop a boulder. Below him was a horde of hyenas, so many that they looked like one entity. This footage was taken before the first attack on Leo and his pride. The scene was mind-numbing to the viewers. They felt a chill run down their spine as they witnessed two unlikely predators form a relationship. The relationship between a king and his subjects. The hyenas, although they numbered in the hundreds, did not attack the lion but instead bowed down to him and seemingly responded to his roars. Scar was a disabled lion. He could never win a straight fight against his brother even if he had the element of surprise. But this weakness led to a new innovation. Nature finds ways to survive. Scar had a deep relationship with the hyenas in his territory, Dr. Tunsun explained. This was a direct parallel to Leo and his relationship with the vultures. I guess now we know where Leo got that trait and how he was able to make a completely different species serve under him, he said. This was yet another proof of Leo's origin. His ability to tolerate other animals and form partnerships with an entirely different species. The abundance of food led to his perfect childhood development that allowed him to grow massive. His unorthodox method of lifestyle was not affected by tradition because the lions in the Pridelands were cut off from the rest and created their own style of living, Dr. Tunsun explained. But returning back to our main subject, Scar's rule triggered one of the most devastating ecological collapses this plateau has ever seen. He was the sole responsible one for turning this paradise, he said, and the documentary showed the paradise. To this, the documentary transitioned to the wasteland once more. Dr. Tunsun began, folding his hands together as if steadying himself before explaining something heavy. The first mistake was the predator-prey imbalance. The Pridelands were never built to support large predator numbers. As a high-altitude plateau, its prey base relies on small resident herds, slow reproduction rates, and limited grazing grounds. Under normal circumstances, lions hunt selectively and keep the balance. He shook his head. Scar broke that immediately after he took over as king. He allowed unlimited hunting. To make matters worse, he had hyenas under him. And you did not want hyenas to be given such a perfect opportunity to bring ruin. The prey did not have anywhere to run off to. Without self-control and proper regulation, they were just meat stuck in a pot, the pot being the plateau. Hunting them was easy and effortless, he said. When you remove even 20 or 30% more prey each year in a system like this, it's catastrophic. Reedbuck, bushbuck, eland, and buffalo, none of them reproduce fast enough to survive that new pressure the predators had taken. He inhaled slowly before moving on. The real disaster came from the hyenas that Scar had under him. He let their clans flood the plateau with no restrictions. Hyenas are incredibly efficient predators. Give them food and they reproduce rapidly. A land that normally supports 20 or 30 suddenly had hundreds. And unlike lions, hyenas kill the weak. The ones they target when they hunt are infants and pregnant females. It was a sickening way and completely broke any balance in that plateau. And due to the abundance of food, and with the hyenas no longer having to be scavengers, disease spread fast from carcasses that were not finished. Disease in such an isolated land was catastrophic. In no time, most prey animals were dead or had left the plateau. And that's the point of no return. The documentary played on. It showed a small mini-map of the Pridelands and the plagues and the tragic events that happened one after the other, like a domino effect. From there, the entire food web collapsed. We call it a trophic collapse. Predators became too many, prey too few, and vegetation lost the herbivores that kept it healthy. Grass grew too tall, died standing, formed thick mats, and blocked new shoots. The soil retained less moisture, insects disappeared, and the ground-level ecosystem just withered. The documentary showed CGI-made footage of a time-lapse of the Pridelands. It showed the distant hills and how life slowly perished on that abundance. The CGI showed visuals for everything Dr. Tunson said. Without grazers aerating soil and slowing runoff, water stopped entering the underground pathways. Springs shrank. Streams weakened. Waterholes dried earlier and earlier. At first we thought it was drought, but this was a biological collapse, not a climatic one. His voice lowered. Scar destroyed the Pridelands through ecologically suicidal leadership, too many predators, too few prey, no scavengers, uncontrolled hunting, and turning a closed plateau into a killing ground. The land barely survived him, he said. Music played as the viewers witnessed the collapse of a land so good and prosperous. The sole responsible one was given screen time, seeing everything from the peak of the Pride Rock. But you see no remorse on his face, no regret. But salvation did come. A revenge that would liberate the land had traveled over hundreds of miles and had reached the outskirts of the plateau. It was the return of a lost prince. Welcome home, Leo. The documentary showed Leo walking in a slow gait. His head was down, which was something anyone rarely saw. But even with his head low, his walk was firm and powerful, like the undeniable step of a king. And then he stopped. He lifted his head up and stared at the cliff leading to the plateau. The camera turned and showed Leo's back with the Pridelands in front of him. The music that had been playing in the background reached its crescendo before stopping abruptly. The screen went dark. End of episode 6. Comments. Key Sean Lewis. Leo's final entrance felt straight out of a superhero movie. Why do they have to make a documentary so dramatic and so good? Rylobel. I looked up the director of this documentary and I finally have a name for who caused my suffering. Emmanuel, stop with the cliffhanger and give me episode 7. Victor Mendez, I like that the end of the episode actually felt like a documentary this time. Still can't forget the rom-com beginning though. JTSSE, I know I'm getting flamed but I kind of like Hyena King Scar. He is king, who gives a damn what he did with his kingdom? Ken Jenkins, wish they had a premium or VIP airing. I would pay my organs for the next episode right now. First POV, I'm a father. Yo, check it out, I'm a father. I have children and shit, or cubs in this case. My new title as a father was an identity I thought more of and was more proud of than being a king in that moment. It was like when I became a new king all over again. Please, Zuri, let me see them again, I asked in a whine. I was sitting in front of their nest. The size of me was almost the size of 4 of them when they were crumpled up like that. I was sure it looked comical, especially since the humans took a plethora of pictures. But I didn't give a shit. I want to see my cubs. Just for a while, okay? They get cold quickly, Zuri said with a fond smile and rolled her body to reveal the 3 cubs she had under her. I leaned down really close to look at them. They seemed like powder, milk and young blood. A lion cub in their first week was one of these tiny little critters that was completely blind. They were so vulnerable that they should not be exposed to outside factors for a while. I wanna lick them. But Zuri growled at me the moment I opened my mouth even a little. I looked at her. Sorry, instincts, she said with a sheepish smile. I nudged the small cubs with my nose and licked them. They were so small that my tongue was nearly the size of their whole body. They fell over when I licked them, releasing cute cries as if to ask for help. Okay, that's enough, Zuri said and pushed me away with her head. But I was just getting to know them, I said, but allowed myself to be pushed away. Shoo, go patrol and hunt or something, she said. Female lions were extremely possessive and even more protective at this stage of their cubs' lives. You'll play with them all you want after they grow. Your father will leave you alone now, babies, she said and softly groomed them. The cubs tried to dig their way inside her underbelly once more. They were still blind, so they searched for nipples with their whole face. It was adorable. God, I think I was going to love them too much. That was not a good thing at all in the cruel world we live in. Especially since we were lions. What if they tried to take over my kingdom and challenge me after they've grown? It was not rare for lions to challenge their father. If that time ever came, I might just lose on purpose and let them kill me. Perhaps that would be a fitting end. Leo the mighty king, beaten by none. His only defeat came from his love for his cubs. Or something like that. Go, Zuri said and pushed me with her head again. I'm going, I said with a laugh. Although I was not going to harm them, I fought a lot and could be carrying a disease harmful to the cubs. So honestly, it was best that I was not too close to them. After bidding the lionesses a final goodbye, I set out to patrol. Some time later, do you know what you've done? I asked the lion who had fallen beside my feet. His body was in mingles, his limbs were all broken. The shards of his own bones protruded in some places. Now I can't get near my cubs until I have a long grooming session, I said. There were 2 other dead lions around us. A coalition of 3 had managed to survive the lions and actually came to the pride. Well, they didn't come to us, but they came to the largest watering hole in search of water and prey. That place was reserved for my pride and me. The only remaining lion released quiet whimpers. I decided not to finish him off and let him bleed out. I turned and walked away from the battle scene. After leaving the scene, I analyzed the injuries I sustained in the fight. It hurt more than I would have liked. Perhaps having kids had softened me a bit. Any other time, I wouldn't give them the opportunity to even leave a mark. But now I had a small bleeding wound on my right shoulder and my forearm. The dry season was coming to an end. I could already smell the rain clouds in the air. It would rain soon, and the wet season would begin once more. Not that it made much difference to the pride anyway. I actually preferred the dry season in terms of our diet. It was the climate that was the problem, plus the challengers. I contemplated for a bit whether I should continue my patrol. I looked at the sky, and it was still afternoon. It would be a few more hours until nightfall. In the end, I decided to continue my patrol. Actually, I think I would expand on my patrol area for today. I had nothing else better to do anyway, not like I would be able to play with my cubs after just having a fight with outsiders. Coming back to the pride was fun, but the females could be unbearable sometimes. Everyone wanted cubs inside their belly. That was fun most days, but sometimes, a man needs his alone time. Grim, I called out while walking through the savannah. Grim, I called out again, and a vulture eventually flew down beside me. Expand our range. I'm working overtime today, Grim, I said. Where do you want to go, my lord? He asked. I hummed before saying, north. On it, sire, he said and took higher into the sky. I made my way to the lake. I intentionally enjoyed my surroundings while on my way there. The dry season had bleached everything golden and brown. The odd season had its own charm that contrasted with the green wet season. Looked more African, if you get my drift. When I reached the watering hole, I noticed quite a lot of other animals on the banks. But contrary to expectations, none of these prey animals ran when they saw me. The smaller prey, especially the antelopes and the gazelles, knew that I would never bother to hunt them. My main prey was buffalo at this point. I drank the water first. But while I did, the other animals actually came closer to me and decided to drink beside me. I lifted my head and looked around curiously before I shrugged and continued to drink. But I eventually figured out why they wanted to drink beside me. I saw a movement in the water. The log-looking things that floated on the surface of the water slowly turned and moved away from me. The crocodiles knew to give me space whenever I came to their lake. And the animals knew the crocodiles feared me, so they were taking advantage of my presence to get a safe drink. Boo, I said to the antelope that was putting his head too close to my side of the water. The antelope flinched but never pulled his head out of the water. Instead, his round eyes just stared at me, unimpressed at my attempt to save him. I laughed. Come on, you can drink as much as you want while I'm around, I said while looking around. The animals heeded my call and came even closer to me. They sought out the safety of my vicinity. In the end, the space was getting tighter and tighter, so I walked into the lake instead to go for a swim. The prey animals quickly filled my absence and drank there. The other animals on the other side of the water came over to our side as well, and they took their turn to drink. I laughed at the ridiculous sight and began washing myself in the water. The crocodiles eventually returned cautiously when the other animals came to our side of the lake. But they did not know how to get through me as I swam in their water. Some tried to swim around me, but I headed towards them, and they quickly turned away. Come on, let's go for a swim, I said and put my paws on a giant crocodile that was closest to me. The crocodile exploded in the water. His jaw was moving at a frightening speed, but he never bit down. He was too afraid to bite me and was simply trying to scare me off. But I didn't even react. Even if all the crocodiles in the water tried to fight me, I was confident in coming out alive. The bottom of the lake was still under my feet. Don't do anything stupid, I said and pulled the crocodile towards me and used him like an inflatable tube in a swimming pool. I put my weight on him a bit and began moving to the deeper waters. But the crocodile did not tolerate me for long. It quickly dove into the deeper waters and escaped from my grasp. They were armored and slippery, so my claws did not hold them. After my toy was gone, I staggered on my feet and slowly moved towards another crocodile. But it quickly ran away before I got close. I headed towards another and it ran too. Looking back on shore, I even saw a giraffe using the safe spot to bend down and take a drink. I thought if I wanted to have a giraffe for dinner, but in the end, I still preferred buffalo meat. So I ignored them and continued to swim. I went out of the lake after I'd had enough water. I was very clean by that point, so I shook my fur and decided to continue my patrol. I headed toward the north of my territory. The north was the closest region to the Masai Mara, which was experiencing wet season right now, so the land was greener than even the central region. It was not hard to distinguish between the two lands and know where I was. I saw interesting animals here as well. For example, the ostriches and the elephants herded something I stopped and watched for a while. I continued my patrol until late afternoon came. The sun was starting to make its descent on the horizon, and that was when Grim flew down to me. "My lord, I found something that interests you," he said. "Lead the way," I said, and followed him. After around half an hour, when the sky was bleeding orange, we finally reached the thing that Grim wanted to show me. I knew it immediately because there were many vehicles in one place. The humans had also gathered around something. Curious now, I made my way towards them. There were screams and panicked shouts when the humans saw me, but I did not react or show any signs of aggression. The humans ran back to their vehicles, while some did not go back and simply decided to move away from what they were all gathered around. When I finally saw what it was, I paused. I did not know what I was feeling, but I felt something big rising in my chest. I walked closer to inspect the body, and there, I confirmed that it was a male white rhino that was lying dead on the ground. What killed him?" I asked, but I got my answer when I saw the head of the rhino. His horns. His horns were cut off. My frown deepened. I stood in front of the giant carcass. The rhino must have easily weighed above 2 tons. It was a gigantic beast, which I would hesitate to take on even now. But here he was, lying dead. His magnificence, power, and dignity were ripped from him. I smelled the body and quickly discovered the wounds all over his body. And when I sniffed that, I got the scent, which I'd never smelled before in my life but knew exactly what it was. Gunpowder. First POV, poachers. I suppose if human researchers and wildlife lovers exist, the opposite of the spectrum would too. And they were in my kingdom. My kingdom, mine. And they just killed one of the rarest and most magnificent beasts in my kingdom. White rhinos are something I would respect and hesitate to fight, and something I'd probably avoid killing due to the minuscule size of their population. These humans, I did not welcome them here. I want them out of my kingdom. If not, I would erase them. "Grim, we are not going home for a while," I said loud enough for him to hear. I followed up my words with a shattering roar that I hoped was heard by whoever killed the rhino. I hoped they were scared, because they should be afraid. There were straps and some cloth under the rhino. It was probably done by these researchers. Maybe they wanted to take care of his corpse without letting it rot away or be eaten by odd scavengers. I turned to the remaining groups of humans that were watching me closely. I saw fear and wonder in equal weight in their eyes. "We didn't do it," one of them said when I looked at him. I tilted my head. I knew they didn't do it. I didn't even smell guns or gunpowder on them. I never did. I knew these humans were on my side. The poachers were bad guys and a completely different set of humans. "My name is Dr. Emmanuel. I swear on my life, I will take care of whoever is responsible for this," he said, talking to me like I could understand him. I suppose, although they couldn't understand me, they understood that I was angry at the sight before me. I huffed at him, walking past him as he remained completely frozen. They didn't need to do anything. I would. I left the scene with Grim flying high in the sky along with another group of vultures. They knew exactly what to do, and that was to hunt down the poachers. They are humans. If you see any humans who are different from these people, tell me. Different clothes, different vehicles, anything, I gave the order. First of all, I was not stupid enough to fight these poachers without a plan. If their guns could kill a rhino with half a dozen shots, I was sure their firepower could kill me easier. So I had to approach this cautiously. Luckily, I was a human in my previous life. I knew how they think, I knew how their weapons work, and I could strategize and plan just like them. They'd never know what came for them. In the sky, the number of vultures in the northern Serengeti increased steadily. With thousands of them scouring every area, I was sure it wouldn't be long until they found them. They can't hide from me. Third POV, the edge of northern Serengeti. It was nighttime in the Serengeti. The dry season had always been extremely cold in this land, a direct contrast to how hot it was during the day. It was not early in the night anymore, but it hadn't been midnight either. But by this point, the poachers in the Serengeti were already asleep. It was audacious enough that evil slept peacefully at all, but apparently, evil slept early too. Nearly 100 had come into the Serengeti just 6 months ago, and now 18 of them remained. But they too would leave the Serengeti soon, as they had run out of supplies and had already had a great harvest over their stay. They had to be careful and they couldn't even afford to make campfires. Therefore, it was a strategy of theirs to sleep early and warm themselves by sundown. They set up small camps near their 3 vehicles, some even sleeping under their vehicles for shelter. The place where they rested was near a tree line where they could hide their vehicles with bushes and some trees. 3 members were always stationed as a lookout while the rest slept. They were the ones responsible for killing that rhino. They have had their eyes on that rhino for weeks now, but it was only today that they decided to make their move. They knew many were going to come after them for it, so they killed the rhino only when they were about to leave the Serengeti altogether. As they slept, a peaceful sleep, they probably thought they were already off the hook. They had an ally inside the ranger team responsible for hunting them down. He would inform them immediately if they were about to be found. Now all they had to do was rest well and cross the Mara River before the wet season arrived and made the river impossible to cross with vehicles. Then from then on, they would go home and sell whatever they had to the black market and get rich. But unfortunately for them, someone or something out there was not going to let them escape that easily. "My balls are freezing, this is crazy," one of the poachers said as they huddled together for warmth and shared a blanket. "Why do we have to keep watch anyway? We never had anything to be aware of anyway. Every night so far has been safe," another complained in a hushing tone. "Well, you never know. It's not even the rangers that we need to be wary of, but the wild animals here," the third one said. The 3 shared a conversation under the silence of the night. They complained together most of the time, but sometimes they would talk about what they were planning to do with their money or share funny stories of the past. An hour passed and the night reached its peak. It was midnight, and so far, they had heard or seen nothing at all. By this point, most animals that they should be wary of, like big predators, were already deep asleep. They let their guard down just a bit. "Shit," one of them cursed. "What? I gotta piss. But I don't want to move away from the blanket," he said. "Bitch, go out and pee." "Nah, I'm fine. I'll just do it here," he said. "I swear I'll blow your brains out if you do that," the other warned. In the end, after much protest, the man was kicked out from the huddle. He shivered slightly at the cold temperature. It was not freezing temperature, but definitely less than 12 degrees Celsius. It was the dry season, so most of their clothes were for summer wear, making the night chilly to them. The man picked himself up and went to a corner to do his business. But he was stopped by his friends. "Don't even think about it. I don't want to smell your piss. Go someplace far," they said. The man complained but still decided to move. Indeed, smelling piss whenever the wind blows was not pleasant. So he headed towards the tree line. He stepped into the dry forest and walked past a few trees before he decided that was far enough. He took out his meat, cringing at how small it was when he felt cold. He breathed out a deep breath and slapped his meat a few times to get it awake. "Come on, baby," he said, and he was ready to pee. He finally moved his eyes from his meat to the ground. He searched for something to aim and he looked around briefly. And that was when he saw it. A dark bush to his side. No, it was not a bush because even through the darkness, he could see that the bush had no leaves or small branches. He squinted his eyes and actually saw features on the giant round bush. He froze when the eyes opened. Deep red and orange eyes stared at him and immediately caught his soul. The man did not move a muscle and did not make a single sound. His face paled like he was seeing a ghost, and the first response of his body was to freeze and act like a statue. The instincts knew running was useless, fighting even more so. So the fight or flight response was completely broken. The man could not distinguish any of the shapes or features due to the absolute darkness. But the eyes were glowing, as if they could see perfectly through the darkness with their light. The thing that scared him and unnerved him so much was the distance between those eyes. They must have been a foot apart, and yet they faced forward and locked on him. It was the eyes of a predator. At that point, the man didn't even breathe. He was busy trying to make those eyes be an illusion or disappear. They couldn't be real. But before he could come to a realization and move, the thing moved first. The man didn't scream because his face was bitten off whole. The jaw of the beast was large and wide enough to bite off his face with one clamp. The human skull was nothing compared to animals like buffalo. His head till the ear was completely bitten off. He collapsed with a loud thud. On the other side, the two other guards became alerted by the sound. They turned towards where their friend had gone immediately. Until one of them laughed, "Ha ha ha," he tripped. The thought that they were under attack never crossed their mind. Wild animal attacks were loud, and their friend would have screamed for help so they'd know. And if this was an attack from the rangers, the mole they had inside would warn them before they took any action. It never crossed their mind it was an attack. The two waited for a while before the other nudged his friend. "You should go check." "No way, he's probably pranking us and making us leave our warm spot," he said. They waited for a bit, but still, their friend didn't return. "Go," the other nudged again. "No, you go. I asked you first. And I asked you more, go, 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 go," he said. In the end, the two decided to go together. No one was willing to be the person to fall for the prank alone. So they headed towards where their friend went. One of them carried a hunter's rifle, the other had a pistol on his waist. "Gerard, it's not funny, man," they said as they entered the tree line. "Big mistake." Something large fell on them and crushed them immediately. The sound of bones breaking and flesh exploding from sheer force could be heard echoing in the silent night where crickets were the only sound. One of them managed to release a painful scream too. But both of them died almost instantly. Even one action of the beast was enough to kill a human. But luckily for the poachers, the scream woke everyone up. Third POV, the poachers woke up from the terrified scream of the guard. 18 members of the poachers still remained in the Serengeti. They had 3 vehicles with them. At night, there were always 3 individuals stationed as guards. But now those 3 were dead, killed in just an instant. Now, 15 humans remained. Although the scream was short-lived, there was something about the sheer terror in the sound that immediately killed every ounce of sleepiness inside them. They became alerted, their hands oddly shaking not just from the chilly air but from something else. "Everybody up." The leader of the group, Clinton, said while loading up his rifle. They were at the end of their mission, so their weapons and ammo were on the brink of running out. But they still had enough firepower to blast through a herd of elephants, so none were too worried. Wild animals were scary, but they were nothing in front of their guns. The group woke up with their weapons in hand. They turned on their flashlights, but not too much, as such lights could reveal their location to the rangers in the middle of the night. "Get the cars ready just in case," Clinton said to the other members. There was no need for all of them to be at the edge. It was better to secure escape and other choices in case something went wrong. Some of the members immediately got to work. They had hidden their vehicles amid dry bushes and some dead trees. So 5 out of the 15 members began clearing the vehicle and preparing it in case they needed to make an escape. The threat remained unknown. But 10 members with guns began making their way towards where they heard the scream. Most were carrying a hunter's rifle, some had shotguns, and a few had pistols too. "Jared, Mark," they yelled in hushing sounds while making their way towards the dry, sparse forest. The North Serengeti was always greener than the rest since it was near the Mara River, but even then, the trees were not in full bloom. When they flashed their flashlight, it was easy to see what was in front of them. "Fliz, anyone? Is there anyone who can respond?" Clinton said while leading the group forward. And after they moved past the first tree in the tree line, they finally saw something that froze them completely. 2 mangled corpses. The state that these bodies were in was so gory and horrifying that some people began gagging immediately. Their bodies were crushed completely, and each head had deep punctures that nearly exploded their heads. The poachers did not know how to take in the sight. Was it an animal attack? No. No animal they knew could leave a human in that state. And if it was a wild animal, they would hear the animal's roaring sound or perhaps the struggle of their comrade in his final moments. And even after the animal killed them, it would proceed to make a lot of noise, perhaps eating the corpses on the spot. And it could not be a human either. The bodies were destroyed in such a way that a human never could. There was no stab or the clean cut of a knife. It could not be a gun or a bomb either since they only heard a scream. So the question plagued their mind. What did this? It's a monster, some whispered among themselves. Fear immediately struck their hearts and they began sweating profusely in the chilly night. Clinton, on the other hand, gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes on the corpses. The state they were in looked like they had been crushed by a big animal, something like an elephant or maybe a hippo. Or, it looked like something fell on them. He froze. "Point the flashlight on top of the trees," he said in a tight whisper. They had been avoiding flashing their light upwards since it could be spotted easily like that. But with his words, 3 flashlights moved and shone on top of the trees. Jesus Christ, everyone flinched back. Vultures. A dozen, no hundreds of vultures were sitting on the tree. When their flashlight shone on them, their eyes reflected the light to create an illusion that they were shining. The vultures did not move, they simply watched them closely like they were statues. Everyone gulped. "Boss, I think we should just leave," one member said in a begging voice. But Clinton began lighting up more trees in the surroundings instead. What they saw were still vultures that were perched on the branches like they were waiting for a meal. These were the same vultures that scouted the entire northern region to find them. It was a gripping scene. One that frightened them like little kids because at this point, everyone believed that there was some demonic supernatural shit going on. A movement in the bushes caused everyone to flinch back and aim their weapons towards it. "Do not shoot aimlessly," Clinton warned them. The bush continued moving even when they shone their lights on it. After waiting for a few seconds, the group made their way towards the bush. In the end, they were happy to find out that it was just a vulture cleaning its wings with its beak. It looked at them and clicked its beak when they neared him. But it was in that moment that they finally saw the 3rd corpse. "Jared," they called when they saw the seemingly unharmed corpse. This body was not mangled nor crushed. It was a body that lay face down on the ground. There was no splatter of blood or anything like that. It looked like Jared had passed out in fear of whatever was around here. "Take him here," Clinton said. 2 people came forward and grabbed Jared by the feet. Then they dragged him back to the group. But when the corpse moved, the head that was facing the ground began painting a red line. Not just a red line, pieces of gloppy flesh were left behind. They were pieces of flesh. That was when they realized that Jared was dead. His head had been bitten off in a vertical half. He had no face at all. The 2 people pulling him fell on their butts and quickly scurried away. They tried their best not to scream, but it was hard not to. "Boss, I really think we should leave." Clinton flashed the light as far as he could. He was scared but also enraged at whatever killed his men. But the others did not share his sentiment. They were absolutely terrified at what their boss was thinking. A deep phobia they never had emerged in their mind. Those flashlights, what if they landed on something monstrous? What if those same lights revealed to them something they should never see? It was hard to be brave when faced with an unknown. But contrary to what they knew, the flashlight was not just helping them to locate the beast they were searching for. It also helped the beast locate them exactly where they were in the darkness of the night. After a few more seconds that felt like hours, Clinton dropped his stance and relaxed his posture. He found nothing. It seemed whatever killed his men had already left. And those vultures were waiting for them to leave so that they could eat the corpses. Although angry, Clinton was not going to set out to hunt this animal in the middle of the night. "Let us go," he said. And all hell broke loose. A flutter of wings, a sudden gush of whirling, and chaos descended upon the still night. The vultures attacked the humans all at once. Flashlights waved mindlessly in a flash of chaotic light, and guns were shot out one after another as the people began screaming their lungs out as the vultures attacked. Vultures never attacked living beings. But if they did, or if they were ordered to do so, they could be quite lethal. Beaks that were sharp enough to tear through hide and rip off flesh from buffalo easily were able to tear open the humans in all exposed areas. Talons that could tear skin were enough to tear off a nose or the lips. To make matters worse, the vultures came to their faces and tried to gouge out their eyes. Shotguns exploded, rifles shot into the air. But the vultures were too much even if they shot down one. They clustered around the 10 humans, more than 10 vultures for each human. No one cared about keeping quiet or not revealing their position. They screamed in pain as their eyes were gouged out and their scalps were torn off. The vultures attacked from the back, hitting the skull with their sharp beak. They attacked from the front, aiming for the eyes, and they attacked from the sides, ripping the ears. The people began dropping their guns because at that point, guns were of no use. The better strategy was to use their hands to grab and throw away the vultures on their faces or protect themselves. It was a trap. The moving of the bushes to lead them further into the forest where the vultures would surround them. The corpse was a distraction that made them stay while every vulture got ready. They had been caught in someone's trap. But who? After the guns went off and were dropped, a deep roar reverberated through the entire forest. The vibration was deep and loud enough that they could feel it through their feet. The humans froze, horrified. But it was all too late as Leo flanked them from the side and demolished them in seconds. No one survived. No one out of the 10 humans survived. First POV, humans were fragile. They tear like paper and break like glass. It was an absolute miracle that they were at the top of the food chain. But more surprisingly, I used to be just as weak as they were. I used to be one of them. "Disgusting," I said while spitting out the liver back at the leader's face. They tasted like monkey. They were chewy and fat, and the skin had weird flavors. The only thing good about eating a human was that they had no fur and it was easier to eat them. But I did not. I would not fill my appetite with subpar meat. I threw a glance at the 13 corpses around the forest. Each one of them was brutalized, and the vultures were already starting to eat them. There could not be anyone pretending to be dead and shooting me from behind. All were really dead. I turned towards the tree line and took a sniff in the air. It was hard to differentiate the scents with so much fresh blood flowing nearby, but I was still able to sense a few other humans in their camp. I was waiting for them to enter the forest, maybe try to help their friends and see what was going on. Then I would have the opportunity to kill them. I did not want to reveal myself in the open plains with no cover. If I walked out now, they could be waiting and camping for me. Their guns were already aimed towards where I might appear. I was so much bigger, but their guns could kill bigger beasts than me, so I was careful. The vultures were not much of a help either because they did not know what to look for. They did not know how guns worked. So for the moment, I simply stood amid the corpses. My body was loaded up like a spring, ready to explode forward or to the side where I could take cover from shots. But then my ears perked up. I heard a sound. A few seconds later I was sure that it was the sound of engines starting and vehicles leaving. The headlights of the vehicles also lit up, telling their exact position to me. The remaining humans decided to run. My teeth were bare and I released a roar before exploding out of the tree line. I caught sight of 3 vehicles leaving. I roared once more. The sound I made overpowered every machine noise their vehicles made. I ran after them. I did not want to let them leave my kingdom alive. I had already sentenced all of them to death. I chased after the giants of metal. They were slow and the terrain, although open, was still hard to traverse and gain traction on. They had a slow start, so I was able to catch up to the last vehicle. It looked like a pickup truck. It was carrying something at the back, but that was covered by a cloth. I ran up to the side of the vehicle. My height allowed me to look inside the side mirror of the front seat. I saw a man driving the car. He was sweating profusely while focusing on the terrain ahead. It was dark and the headlights provided very little vision for the darkness ahead. He turned his head to the side, briefly catching a glimpse of me. Then he did a double take. His eyes widened and he screamed extremely loudly. Tears immediately exploded in his eyes, his nose leaking snot when he saw me looking through the open window. He almost looked pitiful. Good. I quickened my speed to match the vehicle that was gaining more speed. I moved away from the car, making a good distance horizontally. I also looked at the terrain ahead. My predator eyes and night vision were used to calculating the movement of my prey in times of chase. I saw uneven ground ahead. After some more instinctive calculation, I leaned towards the car again. I rapidly closed the distance I made once more, and right when the car rode on the uneven ground and was briefly midair, I slammed at the side of the vehicle. Utut! Metal caved, muscles groaned, bones cracked, and half-open glass broke. And then the car toppled, twisting and falling on its side. The momentum continued to carry it for a long distance as it drove its side on the ground. I slowed down my speed, limping a bit. I flicked my arm and the shoulder that I used to slam on the vehicle. I felt some bones snapping back into place. Immediately I made my way to the vehicle that had fallen on its side. I headed to the front and towards the driver's seat. I saw the human waking up groggily, his head probably dizzy from the crash. But when he saw me, all dizziness vanished and he screamed. He screamed so much, too much. No. Please. I broke the windshield with a swing of my paw. Then I lunged forward, biting the man by his head. Then I pulled backward with a violent tug. He was wearing a seatbelt, so I could not pull him out. But the safety belt only assured his death as I pulled out his head from his weaker neck connection. I spat out the head immediately without chewing. After killing him, I turned my body to look ahead. The other 2 vehicles unfortunately escaped. I could see their light from a distance, but they were too far away now to chase after them. So I decided to roar as loud as I could. It was a warning to never step foot in my kingdom again. It might sound silly, but I was sure they understood the warning. Roar. My roar was so loud, especially in the night, that it felt like the whole world could hear it. The atmosphere felt like it was tearing down. And the sheer silence that followed the end of my roar felt deafening. That should be enough, I said with a flick of my head. Although not an excellent job or a complete wipeout, I was satisfied with the work I did. Perhaps letting some escape was a good decision. They would spread the story and discourage anyone from stepping foot in my kingdom. I looked around my surroundings, learning where I was. After that, I was about to head home. But then I heard small whimpers and howls coming from the vehicle. I turned back to the man I just killed. I pawed his fallen head, looking him dead in his eye. Then I crushed his head like a watermelon. But my ears still heard the tiny whimpers. It was then that I realized the sound came from the back of the vehicle. I made my way towards there and saw that the cloth was still there, covering the back of the pickup. I bit the cloth and tore it open. And that was when my eyes landed on 2 white rhino calves inside a crooked cage. I blinked. They were crying for help. I could understand that much even though we were different species. They were on top of each other, obviously bearing the fall of the vehicle. It was obvious from the milk scent they had that they were just young calves. They also had very juvenile features, like ridiculously big hooves, looking like a child that wore oversized shoes, along with chubby little lumps for horns. But do not get me wrong, they were big. They occupied the back of the pickup truck entirely. Let's see, I said thoughtfully while looking at their cage. The cage had a simple lock mechanism. It did not even require a key, but an animal would never open the cage. But fortunately, I could open it with my intelligence. The opening was on top of the cage, but since the car and the cage were on the side, the calves could escape from the door easily. After I opened the door, I helped them come out. They were still crying and whimpering while I did this. When they both came out of the cage, they moved close to me in what I could only assume was how rhinos hug. They were strong and heavy even at such a young age. I would guess they were no older than 5 months old, maybe around 4 months old. But they would be heavier than most of my lionesses individually. Rhinos, especially white rhinos, were the second largest animal on land. The two calves continued to huddle close to me, both of them pressing and crushing me from both sides. I should be annoyed, I should just kill them and eat their soft flesh. A part of me told me to do that. The predator part of me. The king inside me told me to leave them here for the good humans to find. But like I said before, these parts of me were not the most dominant at the moment. At this stage of my life, I identified as a father. And that paternal instinct was thoroughly won over by their cute whimpers. They were like my cubs, only much bigger and eating grass. Okay, I am taking you home with me, I said with a wide grin. I wrapped my arms around them and hugged them. Ah, they were so adorable, I even groomed their furless skin in assurance. Third POV, when the rangers and the researchers heard the sounds of roars and gunfire, they gathered their forces and set out immediately. It was past midnight when they arrived at the scene. 4 vehicles and nearly 30 members came to check the situation. The non-violent women or the non-combative researchers were left in the headquarters. The people who came here were all trained and were ready for conflict. They were prepared. But no one could prepare or be ready for what awaited them. The vehicle that had crashed on its side was the first thing they found and the first place where they stopped. The rangers came out of the vehicle and quickly surrounded the area. The others remained in the jeep. Yar. Emmanuel came out first, along with the chief ranger. They headed towards the front of the crashed car and they stepped on some blood and brain matter. At that point they didn't know what it was. Ew, what's that? The chief asked when he stepped on something wet and soft. Dr. Emmanuel shone his light at his feet. It was red, and flesh that looked chewed up along with what looked like glass shards. I don't know, he said. He shone his light on the ground and on the pile that the chief stepped on. It was hard to tell what it was, but when they saw an ear along the mass of red, it clicked in their mind. That's. Both ran towards the windshield of the fallen vehicle. When they shone their light in the driver's seat, they finally saw the broken windshield and the corpse without a head that was barely strapped down by a seatbelt. Dr. Emmanuel gagged. Oh, freaking hell, he cursed out loud, trying his best not to vomit. The chief looked away and reported in his radiophone, "We found a body, a dead body. Male, from what I can see, and his head is gone, likely crushed by something a few meters away from the body." It was hard. The two of them got back in their vehicle. They left a few operators and a ranger to take care of this scene while they headed towards where the fallen pickup truck came from. It was dark in the night, and the path in front of them was barely visible even with the headlights of their vehicles. But the group knew exactly when to stop and where. The smell of blood and flesh was strong, and they saw a horde of vultures in the area. When they got out of the car, they could hear the sound of drones flying lower to the ground due to the sky being taken up by the vultures. They headed towards the tree line immediately. There, the group found vultures piling on top of each other and having a feast. They tried to shoo them away at first, but that didn't work. Their numbers were too many. So the chief ranger shot his gun in the air. Finally, the vultures took flight and left whatever it was they were feasting on. And that was when they were greeted by the ugliest sight they had ever seen. Corpses. Not just any corpses but half-eaten corpses. The kind that had no nose, no eyes, or ears anymore. The kind that had their clothes ripped and their skins half peeled or completely peeled. Dr. Emmanuel could not hold it anymore as he vomited on the spot. Check the area. Tell me how many corpses you find, the chief ordered before quickly covering his mouth. He, too, found it hard to stay stoic. In total, they found 13 corpses in the sparse forest. All bodies were dismantled and half-eaten, so it was impossible to identify them anymore. Due to the vultures, they couldn't even tell how they died yet. This was a wild savanna. Doctors or forensic individuals could not come here and check the crime scene. So these dead people would just die like that, their cause of death forever unknown. Unexplained fatality. That would be their fate in their death certificate. But although there would never be proof, everyone had a clue about the beast that did this. An animal that could topple a small truck, an animal that could kill humans with ease, and one that was closely associated with vultures for the deaths he brought everywhere. What do you think happened to them? The chief asked while looking at the sky. The sheer stench of blood made his head dizzy. Dr. Emmanuel continued gagging even after he emptied everything. He wiped his mouth and closed his eyes. The wrath of the king, he said. They provoked him by hunting in his territory, so he treated them like any challenger, Dr. Emmanuel said. It's a massacre. How ridiculous it was to worry about Leo and his pride. Dr. Emmanuel had been protective of them when he heard that poachers were in the north. He prayed for them. Now he realized he had been praying for the wrong side. First POV, the baby rhinos were extremely playful and slow. Not only do they tire quickly from the walk, but also they could never walk in a straight line for more than a few minutes. They had to zigzag, smell everything they saw, play touch butts frequently, and come back to hug me whenever they remembered I existed. And I didn't have it in me to scold them. It was only at sunrise that we reached the pride. When we got close to my pride, the two rhinos finally slowed down. Perhaps they realized instinctively that a group of predators was dangerous. They came and hid behind me while we approached. My king, Esh, was the first to greet me while coming up. The rest of the pride also moved along with her. You didn't return yesterday, so we were a bit concerned, she said. I had things to take care of, I said with a nod. Then she looked behind me. The two rhinos were hiding, but since they were so big even at a young age, they were very obvious. Even my large frame couldn't cover them. The rest of the pride stopped around me and sat down. They too curiously glanced at the rhinos, much to their further embarrassment. One of them tried to hide under my legs, but that was obviously not possible. May I ask who they are? Right, I said and moved away. They stood up and tried to run behind me again, but I stopped them with a paw. Everyone listen, I said in a loud voice so everyone could hear. The sun was peeking out on the horizon, washing everything with orange light while I introduced my new babies. We have been having new members in our pride recently, and these two are just another addition, I said, scanning everyone to make sure they were listening. The rhinos perked their ears and looked around as everyone scrutinized them. I was not sure whether they were siblings, but they behaved like so. They are Jumbo and Mambo, the newest members of our pride, I said in a firm voice. And children, I said while looking at them. I smiled. Welcome to your new family. Third POV. Is that a freaking rhino that I'm seeing? Ramirez asked while looking at the footage on his screen. As usual, he was using his drone in the morning to capture footage of the Serengeti and to assess the surroundings. But unexpectedly, his drone did not make it far. It stopped and lingered on Leo and his pride and focused on the new members. Let me see, Hannah said, coming out of the tent naked and hugging him from the back. Their relationship had developed wonderfully. although they still have not done the deed yet. The wild Serengeti and the thin tent did not exactly provide the best place. Both of them were also virgins, so they wanted their first time to be special and somewhere nice, not in the middle of work. But both were suckers for cuddles, and in the chilly night of the Serengeti, they were cuddle buddies, sharing body heat and all that. "Oh shit, there really is a rhino," Hannah said. She blinked owlishly and her drowsiness disappeared with every moment. They saw the two rhinos lying down beside Leo, who was cuddling with them protectively. It didn't look like Leo was faking it or playing with his food either. It looked absolutely adorable, actually. The biggest, meanest lion on Earth, cuddling with a baby herbivore, was a sight they'd never forget. I knew it was getting too ordinary since the baby-making arc. About time he did something groundbreaking, Ramirez said and played with his lips. He absolutely wanted to smoke about now. He had been a smoker since he was young, and he only smoked more to keep insects away in his line of work. But Hannah did not like it, so he stopped immediately. He was still getting used to the non-smoker life. Killing other lions is getting boring, so you decided to show something new, huh, big guy? Hannah commented too, her eyes locked on the screen. Leo would groom the furless rhino whenever he slipped out of his nap. I thought I heard something. Dr. Tunsun came up to the tent of the couple, a laptop in one hand and a cup of instant coffee in the other. "You're awake now, good," he said while standing over them. "Get dressed, will you? We have big news from the main headquarters." Dr. Tunsun left them to get dressed. The two looked at each other for a second before getting up to dress. Yar. Tunsun was not one to have such a serious expression, so it must be big. After they got dressed, they came to the campfire. Dr. Tunsun was already sitting on the log they used as a seat, his laptop on the retractable plastic table. "So what's up?" Ramirez asked, standing with folded arms. Hannah sat at the other end of the log bench. "It's not what's up, it's what the hell happened," Dr. Tunsun said. "I have been awake since 3 a.m. And it's because of this, Dr. Tunsun said and handed his laptop to Ramirez. He took the laptop and after taking a glance, his eyes widened. On the laptop were all the images of what transpired last night with the poachers. The scene was red and gory. It was unlike anything Ramirez had ever seen before. It was much more horrifying than most Hollywood horror movies. "There's more," Dr. Tunsun said. Ramirez gulped and he moved to the next image. Every picture seemed to be worse than the last. His face changed expression rapidly as he swiped through the photos. "What is it?" Hannah stood up to try and see what the images were. "No, baby," Ramirez stopped her immediately. "You shouldn't see this." Hannah sat back down, more confused and worried. Ramirez held his throat as he felt bile coming up. He tried his best not to gag. He could barely stand those pictures. "We've been notified of the poachers in the northern region. They were attacked last night, 13 dead bodies were found. Their bodies had been mauled and ripped apart to the point that they were unrecognizable. They couldn't even prove how they died or what killed them," Dr. Tunsun said. Hannah gasped loudly. She hated poachers, but in the end they were still humans like her. Death was not some silly thing, especially when it came to humans. The main suspect is Leo. He is the only animal in the whole Serengeti who could do such things. They also found vultures around the corpses, but those prove nothing. Vultures eat all dead animals, not just the ones Leo killed, he said. They have no proof against him, so they can't take any action, Dr. Tunsun said. But you think he is the one that killed them? Hannah asked. Just between us, yes. I am 100% sure it's Leo. No other beast has the intelligence to massacre people with guns like this. Even an elephant would not be able to win that battle, he said. But we must never admit that. A wild animal killing a human is unacceptable by law, even if they were poachers, Dr. Tunsun said. And from the evidence, it was clear that the poachers were making camp there and they were attacked by an animal. It was not self-defense but a hunt. An animal that hunts humans. So Leo could get in trouble if word got out, Hannah said. He can be named a man-eater, Dr. Tunsun said, although that's a worst-case scenario. But still, if it is known widely that Leo killed these poachers, we are in for a big controversy that could affect everything, even our jobs. So we must make our intentions clear. If a detective or rangers ever question us, we will deny the possibility that Leo is responsible and claim his innocence as the researchers who have known him for the longest, he said. Ramirez made a face. Is this a crashed vehicle that I'm seeing? Ramirez asked when he saw a certain image. Hannah stood up to see once more and this time, Ramirez let her. The image was only that of the pickup truck that had fallen to the side. It had no gory images that she would seriously regret seeing. Oh, was the only thing Hannah said after seeing the picture. It was not the vehicle that was the problem, but the empty cage on the back of the truck. Pretty crazy, right? To think Leo was able to topple a whole truck. You know, the investigation states that the vehicle was driving when it crashed. That meant Leo chased it like he would chase buffalo and slammed it from the side, Dr. Tunsun said. Both shook their heads, not sure how to break the news. We might have a problem, Doctor, Hannah said. What? Ramirez went back to the tent to take his screen. There, he played the footage that he took this morning. It was a video of Leo and his pride, including the new members. When they showed it to Dr. Tunsun, he deadpanned and rubbed his eyes. So those were the ones in the cage, he said with a heavy heart. He did not know whether to be happy or sad. Maybe he was both. It was the perfect crime, no proof, no evidence. But the murderer just had to wear the clothes of his victims the very next day. I guess we have to think about legal battles, or at least brace for some controversy, Ramirez said. I guess we do, Dr. Tunsun said. Luckily, the video was absolutely adorable, so it was able to distract his mind. It also made his belief clear on who was the real evil and who was the king and protector. Damn it, we are the good guys, Dr. Tunsun declared, and good guys win. Third POV, the investigation is over, we have determined the events and the cause of deaths, the chief ranger said. Leo has with him 2 baby rhinos suspected to be in the cage of the fallen vehicle. It's undeniable that Leo is the one that attacked their camps, he said. They were in the main headquarters. The giant tent was filled with people this particular morning. The death of 13 people was not some small thing that could be ignored. It was huge. The media wanted a piece of it, the police wanted a piece of it, and so did basically everyone. So what are you going to do now? Dr. Emmanuel asked, sitting coolly on his chair and smoking a cigarette. Excuse me? The chief ranger turned to him. I said, what are you going to do now? Dr. Emmanuel said, his eyes red from the lack of sleep. I will bring justice, of course, the chief answered. There was an immediate tension between them as the two exchanged words. Everyone else became quiet and watched their interaction. Bring justice to what exactly? Emmanuel asked. To the victims. I will let you rephrase that word. Dr. Emmanuel cut him off, much to his anger. There is a man-eater out there and I cannot let this slide so easily. People died last night, doctor, they died a brutal death, he said. A brutal death, or a deserved death, Dr. Emmanuel argued. No one deserves to die, the chief said, his voice going dangerously low. I suppose you are right. But the poachers crossed into a protected area that is the Serengeti through illegal means. They had with them illegal firearms. And they hunted endangered species and were about to traffic 2 white rhino calves, he said. Maybe they don't deserve to die, but they were not victims either. The chief ranger gritted his teeth while glaring daggers. Dr. Emmanuel stood up coolly. You know, I've been thinking a lot since yesterday. I was there when Leo came to the dead rhino, and I think it was in that moment that he decided to remove the poachers from his kingdom. And the same night, he was able to locate them and kill them. Don't you think that is a bit too easy? A wild animal finding his target immediately when the whole ranger squad could not remove the poachers after 7 months, he asked. Now he was standing right in front of the chief. What does Leo have that you don't? Is he smarter? I suppose not, since you are a human, the most intelligent species on the planet. Vultures? You have a dozen drones that are faster and more efficient. People? You have an entire squad. He hunted them alone, he said. At first I thought it was incompetence, but then your reaction to the whole incident made me think otherwise. Maybe there is a reason why those specific poachers were never found and why you react so intensely after they were killed. There was silence. Are you accusing me? The chief asked. You must be out of your mind. What can I say? I have a wild imagination, Dr. Emmanuel said with a shrug. Was one of the poachers your friend? He asked, and it seemed that crossed the line. The chief exploded violently, throwing a right cross at the doctor. But Emmanuel, although tired and sleep-deprived, was too fast and too cool to be hit. He sidestepped the cross and hit the chief right at the jaw. The people immediately came between them to stop the fight from continuing. But the chief had a bloody nose and Emmanuel had made his point. There was a mole among the rangers that allowed the poachers to be in the Serengeti as long as they were. And maybe in this recent development, those corruptions would be found. Third POV, the latest episode of the documentary about the Lion King Leo had put the whole world in a massive cliffhanger. There was a new spike in debates and questions among the public regarding the unbelievable events that were taking place and were about to take place. A seemingly unknown land discovered, the existence of a lion king that formed a partnership with hyenas, the origin of the extraordinary lion Leo, and everything in between. The people did everything to get answers and spoilers to their questions. The research about Leo had been kept secret for years, and it was hard to find information. Old interviews on Joe Rogan or some articles that pointed to Leo as an unknown example of new discoveries were all that were found. But among the many interests, one news article that came out years ago had gone viral. In this article, Leo's name was not mentioned, but many different sources proved that the lion mentioned here could be the same as the lion they watched in their documentary. The article was as follows. The Serengeti massacre that should never have happened. Northern Serengeti, Tanzania. A series of attacks in the northern sector of the Serengeti has raised both alarm and fascination among conservationists, rangers, and the wider public. Sometime between midnight and dawn 4 days ago, 13 suspected poachers were found dead across a scattered area of grassland and sparse forest. The remains, which were discovered by Serengeti National Park rangers responding to gunshots and roars, show signs of a violent encounter not previously recorded in the region's modern conservation history. The leading suspect is not a person. It is a lion. More specifically, rangers believe the killings were the work of a dominant male lion who rules territories spanning the northern Serengeti. Researchers referred to him as the sole lion that ruled the whole of Serengeti. The large male has been known to patrol the area around the Nyamulumbwa Plains, where the massacre took place just a few days prior to the incident. The case has rapidly become one of the most unusual wildlife-related incidents in recent African conservation history. It touches on poaching, ecosystem disruptions, predator behavior, and the ethics of human-animal conflict. And as investigators continue to document the scene, more questions arise than answers. Recent developments have also revealed a disturbing element, a mole within the ranger force who may have enabled the poachers to remain undetected for months. A pattern of loss, rhinos targeted once more. The poaching group in question had been under quiet suspicion for months. Rangers had gathered partial evidence like spent rifle casings, butchered carcass remains, disturbed fencing, boot tracks, and suspicious abandoned camps, which suggested repeated incursions into protected zones. Their target was endangered species, mostly the rare white rhinos. White rhinos in the Serengeti are critically scarce. Current estimates suggest fewer than 20 remain across the connected Serengeti-Ngorongoro corridor. These individuals are closely tracked through GPS chips, ranger patrols, and aerial surveillance. The deaths of 3 white rhinos, 1 adult male and 2 females, over the past 7 months had sparked internal investigations. The carcass of each was found stripped of horn, the signature of commercial poaching. But until now, the perpetrators had never been confirmed. Whoever they were experienced, said a senior ranger officer who requested anonymity. They knew how to avoid surveillance somehow. They moved at night. They understood the terrain just as well as we do. They were careful and patient, and suspiciously, they always kept ahead of us. Poachers in northern Tanzania are often transient groups who move quickly across borders and sell horns through trafficking chains stretching from East Africa to Mozambique and beyond. But this particular group had done something most don't do and stayed in the northern Serengeti. Evidence indicates they were operating from rotating temporary camps for months, longer than most poaching factions risk staying in the same region. A later internal inquiry revealed how they stayed ahead. Chief Ranger Elias Karum, a long-trusted officer, had been feeding information to poaching networks. Evidence revealed that Karum had been leaking patrol routes, surveillance blind spots and rhino tracking data to poaching syndicates in exchange for bribes. Dr. Emmanuel, a researcher stationed in the Serengeti, had been immensely helpful in the investigation and arrest of the corrupt ranger. The government is considering giving him a Medal of Honor, a Medal of Heroism, and a medal reserved for the greatest conservationists, including a permanent citizenship and a massive cash prize. But Dr. Emmanuel stayed humble and declined the rewards, stating that he was doing what a good man should. He did accept the cash reward, but every single penny was donated to help the wildlife and the needy. Signs of a violent encounter. The scene discovered by rangers was unlike anything they had witnessed. A small pickup truck lay overturned in a ditch, its side panels crushed inward. Tire tracks and drag marks indicated the vehicle had been rammed with immense force. Rangers later confirmed the vehicle had been carrying the 2 rhino calves and that it had overturned while trying to flee. The windshield was shattered from the outside, and the driver, who was still strapped in his seatbelt, had been decapitated, a detail investigators described as consistent with a large predator breaching the cabin. The 13 bodies were not found in the camp itself but scattered throughout a nearby forest, suggesting the poachers fled and were pursued or intercepted in the dark. Most bodies had already been partially eaten by vultures and possibly scavenged by the lion afterwards. While the precise cause of death for each individual is still being examined, injuries appear consistent with a sustained attack by a large predator or predators. Lacerations matching claw size, crushed ribs, and deep punctures resembling bite marks were documented. It is one of the most brutal scenes we have ever documented, said Dr. P. Mwakiembe, a wildlife biologist assisting the investigation. We cannot comment on the exact sequence of events until forensic teams finish their evaluation, but initial impressions suggest tremendous force was involved. The Lion King's territory, the dominant male believed responsible, has been known to researchers for roughly 3 years. He controls a pride consisting of several lionesses and cubs and is notorious for aggressively defending his territory. Rangers have documented multiple instances of him chasing off hyenas, leopards, and even smaller prides encroaching on his domain. But interference with humans, especially coordinated confrontations, is considered exceedingly rare. But proof that the lion was responsible emerged the next morning when 2 rhino calves that had been captured by the poachers were seen with the male lion and his pride. Was this self-defense, territory protection, or something else? The core of the controversy centers on the interpretation of the lion's actions. Wildlife experts consider several possibilities. 1. Defensive aggression triggered by the calves' distress. If the poachers had the rhino calves restrained, crying out or struggling, it is possible the lion responded to the distress call. Lions, like many predators, react powerfully to the sounds of vulnerable animals. 2. Territorial instinct. Poachers had been moving within the lion's core territory. The vehicle, equipment, and scent may have attracted his attention or been interpreted as an intrusion. 3. A combination of both factors. The most likely explanation, according to several biologists, is a multi-trigger event involving scent, noise, and territorial aggression amplified by stress within the ecosystem. Whatever the motive, the scale of the encounter raises the question: is this a natural consequence of long-term poaching activity or an anomaly unlikely to ever repeat? Legal and ethical questions. The deaths of the poachers present a legal gray zone. Under Tanzanian law, entering a protected reserve to kill endangered wildlife is a serious criminal offense. However, the law does not directly address liability when a wild predator kills individuals engaged in illegal activities on protected land. The Tanzania Wildlife Authority has clarified that no charges or investigations are directed toward any wildlife involved. This was a natural event, said Dr. T. Soma Tansun. Humans entered a predator's territory during illegal hunting operations. The consequences are tragic, but they fall within the risks of engaging in criminal activity inside wildlife-protected zones. Still, some human rights advocates have expressed discomfort with the celebratory tone circulating online, where many have hailed the lion as a hero of conservation. It is important to remember that regardless of their actions, these individuals were human beings, said attorney Doreen Kibwana of the East African Legal Rights Initiative. We must approach this with seriousness and empathy. Their families deserve clarity, and their deaths should not be trivialized. Dr. Emmanuel's perspective. This incident sends a powerful message, not from us, but from nature itself. When humans destabilize the ecosystem, the land responds in ways we cannot predict. A lion does not understand law or conservation. It simply protects what it believes is its own. He paused before adding, but at the same time, we must not romanticize violence. Our job is to prevent this from happening in the first place. That means identifying poaching groups earlier, intercepting them safely, and ensuring wildlife does not need to become the enforcer. But in this case, the lion is not guilty of any crime. The public debate. The incident has sparked intense discussion across Africa and abroad. Some argue the lion's actions amount to a natural form of justice, an ecological balancing force in a world where wildlife often suffers silently. Others believe celebrating the deaths of humans, however criminal, is ethically troubling. The case also raises broader questions. How far should conservation systems go to deter poachers? Does this event highlight failures in ranger surveillance? Can predators become more aggressive if poaching pressures mount? Should the lion be monitored more closely or left entirely alone? What does this mean for future human-wildlife encounters in protected territories? As the region recovers from the shock, the debate continues. A symbol or a warning? To many, the Lion King of the northern Serengeti has become a symbol of untamed authority, territorial sovereignty, and nature's resilience. To others, he represents the unpredictable danger of the wild. But perhaps he is neither hero nor villain. Perhaps he is simply what he has always been. A guardian of his land, acting without malice, without morality, and without awareness of the global conversation he has sparked. The rhino calves now sheltered within the pride are monitored discreetly by conservation teams from a distance. Their survival is a rare glimmer of hope in a situation defined by loss. The 13 poachers, whose identities are still not confirmed, leave behind unanswered questions and grieving families. Their story is a reminder of the economic desperation and international market forces that continue to fuel illegal wildlife trafficking. And the lion responsible for the massacre remains a reminder of the ancient power that still governs the Serengeti, long before human borders or legal systems existed. The article had blown up, with many sharing varying degrees of opinion. The controversy from years ago had seemed to be reawakened. But in the end, they hope to find answers in the upcoming episodes of the documentary. For now, the 7th episode of the documentary just dropped. Third POV, Documentary Episode 7, Name, Dr. T. Soma Tansun. Role, Lead Researcher of Leo's team. Before we begin this episode, I want to emphasize something important, Dr. Tansun said as footage of the night sky rolled over the plains. What you are about to see is behavior no field researcher, no ethologist, and no carnivore specialist in the world has ever documented before. Even now, years later, we still cannot fully explain it. The insane story that you are about to witness might seem impossible, it might seem unreal or fictional. But it did happen. I saw it with my very own eyes. But any comments we made should be taken as pure speculation. After all, we are not mind readers and could not know what was happening inside the animal's head, he said. But at the same time, know that these narrations and speculations took years in the making and should be the closest thing we could get to the truth. The documentary finally began with showing the sunrise and focusing on Leo, who was gazing at the plateau before him. This was the exact scene where the last episode left off. At long last, Leo and his pride reached the Pridelands after a grueling journey that lasted over 2 weeks. The footage changed briefly to the pride that was resting under the shade of a tree in the bright morning. The journey had taken a toll on everyone. Lions were not animals designed to migrate over long distances, much less cover hundreds of miles in a week. But the stress on their body was much less due to their strategy of traveling during the night to avoid heat stroke, he said. The scene changed back to Leo. And although the king seemed to want to climb up the plateau and challenge King Scar already, he knew he had to recover from the journey first. And what is the best way for the body to recover? Leo finally moved from his spot and headed in a direction. Food. Leo and his pride were known for their incredible diet. They eat every 2 days, feasting on bulky buffalo meat. But that kind of diet had to be stopped after they left the Serengeti. And now, in the deserted land of the Pridelands and its outskirts, prey was scarce, he said. But it was in this moment that Leo finally turned his attention on an animal he had never preyed on before. The footage changed to an aerial shot. It panned towards a lone figure in the dry land, a bull giraffe. It was massive, with a long, thick neck that looked like it came straight out of a fictional book. The stats of the animal were briefly displayed. 5.5 meters tall, that was nearly 2 basketball rims stacked on top of each other. It also weighed nearly 2,000 kilograms. Normally, giraffes are among the last animals a lion targets, Dr. Tunson explained. They are not easy prey. They are not convenient prey. But here, at the outskirts of the Pridelands, they were the only prey left. The footage shifted to the barren terrain around the plateau, cracked soil, dead trees, and distant skeletons half buried in ash-colored dust. The ecological collapse caused by Scar had wiped out nearly every water-dependent herbivore. Wildebeest, zebra, gazelle, and others. They need grasslands with seasonal water, so when the plateau fell apart, those species vanished within a year. But the giraffe survived differently. The camera showed the bull giraffe plucking leaves from the canopy with casual ease. Giraffes occupy a vertical niche. Their height allows them to feed on tree canopies far above ground level. Even during drought, trees can store moisture deep in their trunks, meaning giraffes often remain when all grazers disappear. They can go weeks without drinking if their food is rich in moisture. So while every other prey species had either migrated, died, or collapsed under hyena pressure, giraffes endured. Not because they were strong, but because evolution placed their food out of reach of disaster. The documentary zoomed closer to the giraffe's neck. A giraffe's neck can reach almost 6 feet in length. It is a biological crane, a machine perfectly designed for survival during drought. But at the same time, that same neck is a weapon capable of generating forces comparable to a stallion's kick. One strike from it can kill a lion instantly. The audience saw Leo, dwarfed by the giant in a CGI scene. Leo was a behemoth of a lion, but he was still just a lion. His 400-kilogram mass in comparison to the mass of a 1,800-kilogram giraffe seemed underwhelming and outmatched. To a starving pride, a giraffe is an impossible gamble. But to Leo, who had fought lions, buffalo, and coalitions without fear, it was simply the biggest meal he could find for his pride. The scene turned back to Leo, who was making his way towards the giraffe with one lioness. When they reached the animal, the 2 lions paused. They observed their prey from a distance for a long time before eventually, Leo stepped up to try and hunt down the beast solo. Predators rely on stealth, ambush, and deception. We were very excited to see what crazy strategy Leo would use to take down the giraffe, but much to our surprise, Leo seemed to abandon all of these principles. We thought he had given up the hunt before it even began. But then we realized something. The two great animals met in the open plain. It was impossible to sneak up on a giraffe that was basically a living watchtower, so Leo abandoned trying entirely. Two giants of different natures assessed each other. Leo began moving in circles around the giraffe. He was not close enough to provoke a reaction from the giraffe, but enough that he could study his prey for as long as he wanted. Leo was observing the mechanics of the animal in front of him. His gaze kept tracing the neck, the angle, the legs, and the center of gravity. Like we said before, he had never hunted a giraffe before, and right now, we are watching him teach himself how to do so. The two animals continued to watch each other. The giraffe was deadpanning while chewing on leaves, as if he could not be bothered by some big cat. Leo's eyes were locked in, his mouth opening to reveal sharp canines while he breathed from the mouth. There was tension there. The audience could feel it. And then, all tension came loose. Leo lunged out. Without any pause or comment, the documentary allowed the viewers to watch the two giants clash. Leo ran towards the giraffe but stopped at the last second. The giraffe slammed down his hooves on the earth, creating craters and a muffled thud that they could hear even through the camera. The giraffe continued to move forward even after the hooves missed and Leo moved back to dodge them. Dust rose like clouds of smoke. It began swallowing the giraffe and Leo completely. Soon enough, the camera was not able to capture what was going on. And then, the giraffe finally swung his head down like a wrecking ball. His long neck swung to generate immense force that was enough to blow clear the smoke in one swing. When the audience saw Leo again, it was of him barely dodging that powerful swing. Then the video paused in the exact moment that showed Leo's reaction to the swing. It was absolutely hilarious and people immediately took screenshots to make it a meme. It was a true what the hell face on a lion. Dr. Tunsun laughed. Let's get into a bit of detail about why the king had that reaction. The scene changed to show CGI animation that showed an example and visual learning of what the doctor said. A fully grown bull giraffe weighs between 1,200 and 1,900 kilograms, with each leg alone weighing over 100 kilograms. And when that weight is dropped from even a short height, the force becomes catastrophic, he said. Giraffes strike downward with a motion similar to a piston. The muscles of the shoulder and forelimb contract in a single explosive burst, accelerating the hoof downward. The impact can easily exceed 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of force, comparable to getting hit by a truck. To make matters worse, the strike was unlike anything that could be delivered by other creatures. It came vertically, from above, an angle that most animals were not prepared for. The animation continued, showing a giraffe stomping on different things like a human skull and an elephant's skull. Or a small bike or a vehicle. All caved in and cracked upon impact. And there was the neck swing. A giraffe's neck is essentially a 6-foot lever powered by a mass of dense muscle. At the end of that lever is the skull, a compact 13-kilogram hammer. When a giraffe swings its head, the arc generates astonishing velocity. The momentum behind a fully committed neck swing can exceed 3,000 joules of impact energy. When two male giraffes fight each other in what we call necking, the impact alone can be heard a kilometer away, he said. The animation showed a giraffe swinging at an American house and the whole house was completely torn apart and destroyed. That was the kind of power Leo was dealing with, and for the first time. Hence, the footage cut back to Leo's what the hell face before it resumed. Leo moved back rapidly from the giraffe, his muscles tensed under his loose hide like a bodybuilder that was flexing. But instead of running away from the scare, Leo became even more focused. Even after literally dodging death, the king did not give up. And why would he? He had many mouths to feed. The fight continued. Contrary to what many people expected, Leo began fighting more aggressively. When the giraffe rained down deadly stomps, he snapped at the legs and tried to damage them with his jaws. And when the giraffe was ready to deliver another swing, Leo charged forward and slammed into the giraffe's tall chest. At one point, Leo anchored himself on the giraffe, his feet off the ground and dangling. But after repeated stomps and hops from the giraffe, Leo fell and went under the giraffe. Leo came out from the back and barely dodged a back kick that came from the giraffe. People winced when they saw how close it was. Everyone was familiar with a horse kick, but imagine the same action being done by something 4 times the size of a horse. At the end, the giraffe ran away and Leo did not chase after it. He gazed at his fleeing prey, his body mostly unharmed. Unfortunately, this hunt was not a success for Leo. It was an odd start to all the challenges he would face ahead. But do not let this fool you into thinking he failed, because he did not. Every failure was just a learning experience to animals. And in this case, Leo's failure would only be the seed that would bloom into the giraffe being on the lion's diet. The scene briefly cuts to Leo tearing open a dead giraffe and consuming its flesh. He released a victorious roar into the sky. Third POV, name, Dr. T. Soma Tunsun. Role, lead researcher. Now this right here, is where it gets weird. The camera panned closer to the old doctor as he scratched his head as if he was at a complete loss for words. We did not have much footage of what happened. Scratch that, we did not even know what happened until it happened because it was just that unbelievable. Think of the most obviously made-up shit in your mind, and now take an event right above that and pull it down to reality. That's what happened, he said. Wild animals operating like they were special military forces. A display of strategic mind unimaginable for an animal. A bond between two beasts that could compete with love stories in cinema and a show of brutal loyalty, creatures thought to be driven by their natural instincts going against everything we know to sacrifice for the greater good. All of these were packed in this monumental event where nature decided we didn't know shit, he said. From the amount of curse words the dignified doctor was using, you could kind of imagine what was about to take place. We look back on this for years, doing research and tracking where, when and how it began. We didn't have all the pieces, but here's what we know, he said. On the night when Leo reached the underland of the Pridelands, there was an operation, he said. A rescue mission, to be exact. Rescue who? Well. The documentary changed scene and showed the figure of 2 thin lionesses that were skinny enough to see bones. Later studies confirmed who they were. Sarah, the biological mother, he said, and the scene froze on Sarabi's figure. This lioness is the one who gave birth to the king we know as Leo. And Zuri, he said, freezing the scene of another lioness. She was thin, elegant and young. Leo's half-sibling and, from their first reaction to each other, another lover of Leo. Both these lionesses were part of Scar's pride, Leo's enemy. But they and the king did not share good relations, as you will see here, he said. The documentary showed footage taken from a drone. The video was not of good quality. You couldn't tell who was who, but it was enough to show 2 lionesses fighting against a lion. Now what Leo decided to do first before he went to battle was to rescue these 2 lionesses that were clearly in danger when they stayed beside Scar, he said. Leo shared a deep bond with these 2 lionesses, so that seemed like an appropriate reaction. Perhaps he didn't want them to be on the other side of the conflict. And how did he go about it? Well. The scene cuts back to Leo and his pride. The whole pride was up and awake in the middle of the night. They were still used to the pattern of sleeping in the day and being awake at night. They stood there, looking towards the plateau for a while before a portion of the pride moved forward. 5 lionesses, the best of Leo's pride, began running around the plateau. The drone followed them as they made their way. Right then, Leo did his own job and roared into the sky. His roar exploded like thunder, rolling through the vast space like a mountain had gained a voice. His roar was angry and bold and seemingly stupid from all they had seen him do so far. Why reveal yourself like that to an enemy? On the other hand, the 5 lionesses ran and ran and ran for a long time, moving to the southern side of the whole landmass. After almost an hour of traveling, they began scaling up a cliff, which led to the plateau. It was a difficult terrain to scale, almost impossible to think a lion would climb there. And getting down from there was unimaginable. We were shocked at what they were doing. It was only later on when they achieved their goal that we realized they were following a tight plan for this rescue mission, he said. The footage changed to another drone. There were 2 cameramen and a controller that followed Leo and his pride. This one panned into the sky and took the footage of 2 lionesses running together. A vulture was leading the way and the lionesses seemed to follow it. Behind them was a horde of hyenas. They cackled with glee while they chased the 2 runaway lionesses. The drone took further to the skies and eventually a map was revealed to the audience. The map showed the direction where they were headed and also the 5 lionesses who were scaling up the plateau in that moment. It was a perfect coordination. The vultures helped the king in the mission. They were the source of direction and the director of the whole operation. The coordination shown here is not impossible. Animals like birds and wolves have shown even crazier coordination. But what's impressive is that these are animals that have never met before or have not met in a long time. This was not a wolf pack or a flock of birds. These were animals trusting each other and executing a plan made by someone, Dr. Tunsun commented. The drone continued to follow the 2 lionesses' runway. At one point, the hyenas were going to catch up to them. And that was when it happened. Vultures rained down from the sky and began attacking the hyenas to slow them down. Some of them died brutal deaths as they dived right into the hungry jaws of hyenas. This is inexplicable. Even now we don't have a way to explain it other than vultures showing loyalty. These birds are known to be brutal towards their own species, but now they are willing to die to save an animal from a completely different species. The viewers watched the incredible scene of hyenas clashing with vultures. Just, why? Dr. Tunsun asked the question plaguing everyone's mind. Eventually, with the vultures slowing down the hyenas, the 2 lionesses reached the cliff where the plateau ends. By that point, the 5 lionesses from Leo's pride were already on the plateau. They stopped and hid behind the dry trees and bushes. The 2 lionesses reached the location and the hyenas cornered them in just a few minutes. And then, the hyenas were led into a trap. 5 lionesses emerged from their hiding spot and began attacking the hyenas. The hyenas were around a dozen in number, but they stood no chance against prime lionesses that had buffalo for a diet. They were killed quickly. And this is where Nala and one of the runway lionesses' relationships were revealed. Nala came forward and greeted the 2 lionesses. They showed affection like they were still part of the same pride. They licked each other, rubbed their heads and jumped on each other, which was akin to lions giving hugs. Everything became clear to us in that moment. These were not coincidences. We were in the middle of a story whose beginning we didn't witness. But now that we know, we began speculating and searching for the right clues. The documentary continued to cover the 7 lionesses as they fought 9 more hyenas and escaped the plateau from a proper escape route and not just by scaling back down the dangerous cliff. They moved with precision and a plan. They knew exactly what they were doing, and that was horribly strange for animals. Like Dr. Tunsun said, they were like a military squad being guided by aerial assistants. Such coordination and planning was unmatched. By the end, the documentary showed the 2 new lionesses, Sarah and Zuri, meeting up with the whole pride. But there was one problem. Leo was nowhere to be found. We were short on drones to follow Leo and know exactly what he was doing. But he returned an hour later from the northern side of the plateau. We speculated that he was doing his own thing, perhaps distracting Scar and his hyenas by making his presence known from the opposite side of the plateau. The documentary then slowed down after all the explanation and action. It showed the tender moment when Leo returned to the pride. He and the runaway lioness named Zuri met in what could only be a deep and most awaited reunion. Third POV, Documentary Episode 7, Name, Dr. T. Soma Tunsun. Role, Lead Researcher. With two new weak and hungry lionesses joining the pride, the need for food rose sharply. Leo's pride had small meals during their 2-week journey, but nothing comparable to their insane diet back in the Serengeti, Dr. Tunsun said. There were virtually no other prey except small rodents or the giant giraffe in their area. The pride could not hunt for themselves. And hence, it was on Leo's shoulder as the king to provide for his pride. The documentary showed the pride lying down under thin shade. The sun was unrelenting and hot enough to shimmer the air on camera. Sarah and Zuri were fast asleep from exhaustion. Their breathing was weak and sometimes uneven. Their ribs moved like the hinges of old wooden doors, visible through skin. Looking at them, Leo seemed to gain a new resolve for his next course of action. The second hunt for a giraffe began, Dr. Tunsun narrated. Leo stood up. His body cast a huge shadow over the sleeping lionesses. His shoulders rolled once, loosening stiff muscles. Then he began moving away from the pride with steady steps. Like always, the vultures followed him in the sky and began gathering like a dark cloud over him. The drone followed these vultures, and it led them right to where the prey was. A bull giraffe. This one was even bigger than the previous one he fought. The camera zoomed out to capture the scale difference. The giraffe looked like a living tower, swaying gently as it stripped branches bare with its tongue. Dust clung to its hide, but the animal was still majestic and imposing. The giraffe was about 2 kilometers away from Leo. The drone returned and began following the lion as he made a beeline towards the prey. No tracking, no searching, he was guided by his subjects in the sky. It is one thing to attempt such a hunt, Dr. Tunsun said. It is another to attempt it twice. It takes true desperation or true madness. For Leo, it may have been both. When Leo finally reached the vicinity of his prey, he crouched low and began stalking. This was unlike his first hunt, where he just headed towards the giraffe. He approached from the downwind side. His body was low and tense. The camera focused on his tail stump that twitched again and again like an anxious heartbeat. It was a stark reminder to the viewer that the majestic lion was a cripple. A beast nature itself couldn't hold down. His paws pressed softly into the dust. His head mirrored the movement of the giraffe's long neck, following every sway so that he could always be by its blind spot. Unlike his first attempt, Leo was now a student who had taken a full lecture in giraffe combat. He had learned the angles. He had studied the timing. He had memorized the recoil of the neck and the weight of the stomp. It is no exaggeration to say he approached this second attempt like a soldier who had learned every weakness of his enemy, the doctor said. After all, failure was the best teacher. The camera cut to Leo's face. His eyes were sharp and focused, almost like a robot immersed in its programming. He paused. Then waited and waited and waited. Until he broke into a sudden sprint. The giraffe noticed him almost instantly. The long neck was like having a constant watchtower. Just like nature had built Leo to kill, it built the giraffe to survive. The bull snorted and took a step back, its hooves digging into the dusty ground, carving small depressions. Then the first stomp came down. The earth shook and dust exploded upward. Leo dodged with a speed that the drone struggled to track. His forelegs bent and his shoulders dipped low. The stomp crushed nothing but dry soil. The second stomp followed. Leo twisted his torso. His paws left the ground for a brief moment as he slipped past the falling hoof. A sound like a hammer on stone burst out. Even through the recorded footage, the impact made many viewers flinch. In a fight against a giraffe, one mistake is death. And Leo avoided 2 consecutive strikes by only a hair, Dr. Tunsun said. Leo lunged forward. For the first time in the entire documentary, viewers saw him go under the giraffe willingly. It was insane, it was suicidal. But it was necessary. Under the giraffe is the most dangerous place to be, Dr. Tunsun said. But also the only place where a lion can start dealing real damage. The giraffe tried to hop away. Its long legs lifted and landed in chaotic rhythm. Each landing threatened to cave in Leo's skull. But Leo stuck to its underside, forcing himself into the blind spot where the giraffe could not swing its neck and could not stomp accurately. The drone lost sight of Leo for a moment due to the wave of dust. When the camera regained clarity, Leo was latched onto the giraffe's abdomen. His claws dug into the thick skin while his jaws went straight for the most vulnerable spot on the underbelly. He bit down. The giraffe bellowed. It was a deep and haunting scream. Viewers realized they've never heard a giraffe scream before. The animal jerked violently to shake the lion off. Its entire weight was lifted on its forelegs and then slammed down. Leo held on. For a lion, this was not just strength, Dr. Tunsun said softly. This was an obsession with hunger and duty. Soul strength could never forge such a stubborn soul. The giraffe continued to struggle for minutes. Until eventually, its head twisted at the correct time, at the correct place. Its neck whipped downward in a violent arc. The skull shattered into Leo's shoulder. Leo was flung off. Imagine a 400-kilogram beast flung off like that. How much force would that require? The camera jerked as the drone operator cursed off-screen. Ramirez probably thought Leo just died right then and there. Leo crashed onto the ground, rolling several meters. Dust swallowed him. His body twitched, then went still for a moment. The audience held their breath. The most basic and primal instinct after taking such a hit was to stay down or flee. It was the kind of impact that cracks ribs and collapses lungs. Leo might be tough, but he was not that tough. So what happened next is simply just pure resilience. Leo stood up. Slowly, painfully, but he stood up. He shook his mane and exhaled sharply before a deep growl sang from his throat. This was not a predator that was going to give up, this was a beast that never stayed down. Leo charged again. The giraffe retaliated with a kick aimed backwards. A backward giraffe kick has enough power to break the spine of a lion instantly. Leo ducked. The hoof passed right over his head and snapped a dead tree behind him in half. It was one of the trees that the giraffe was eating. Leo slammed into the giraffe's front legs. His jaws clamped down on the inner thigh where the artery ran close to the surface. His weight dragged the massive animal sideways. The giraffe stumbled. One stumble became two. Its front legs wobbled. Its knee buckled. Leo bit deeper, shaking his head with violent force like a pit bull finding its mark. Blood sprayed across the ground. The giraffe roared and tried to regain balance, but the damage was too heavy. Leo switched targets. He lunged even higher and aimed for the top of the leg and bit into the tendon. His legs were dangling and the gaff could not bear the weight since this side of the leg was injured. It collapsed like the tower it was. The ground shook. Dust exploded outward like a shockwave. Leo climbed the fallen beast. His jaws went to the throat, the neck just below the giraffe's head. He bit down with everything he had. The giraffe tried to rise one last time. Its legs twitched and kicked up dirt. Leo simply growled into its windpipe. He held on. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The giraffe's movements slowed. Finally, the giant went still. The camera zoomed out to capture the massive body. Leo remained at its neck for a long time. His middle body expanded as he breathed giant breaths. His whole face was also red. Leo killed a giraffe, Dr. Tunsun said. A lion. Alone. Killed a bull giraffe. The tone in his voice was half awe and half disbelief. Leo stepped back from the body after resting for a few minutes. His ears flicked and his eyes looked to the sky, where vultures were flying in giant wheels. There was no roar of victory this time. Only quiet. Quiet relief. Quiet exhaustion. Quiet pride. He bit into the torso and began removing the organs of the giraffe. He ate the organs quickly and efficiently, tearing through flesh and pulling out the intestines to lighten the carcass. At first, we thought he was eating. But later, we realized Leo was removing every piece of weight he could. He ate what he needed. He discarded what would slow him down. This was not feasting, it was more like a hunter maiming his kill. He was turning a 2-ton animal into something he could drag for miles. Leo also cut down on the bony leg of the giraffe and discarded the limbs from the carcass. Some vultures flew down and fought for those useless parts of the meat. A fully grown bull giraffe can store a surprising amount of moisture in its tissues and digestive tract. The organs are dense and heavy. By eviscerating the animal and discarding the low-value parts first, Leo reduced the mass dramatically. Why was that important? Well, because Leo was going to drag this kill back to his pride. The documentary showed the footage of Leo dragging the carcass. He bit at the lower neck of the giraffe and used his forequarters to lever the load forward. Rocks scraped against the hide and his paws left deep grooves in the soil. Seeing a lion dragging such a heavy mass for 2 kilometers was even more surprising than seeing a giraffe taken down by a lion. For the viewers, that might be odd, but from a researcher's perspective, these were simply supernatural feats. It also gave us much perspective on how Leo's body worked, said Dr. Tunsun. The documentary changed scene and went back to CGI animations for a moment. This show of endurance and strength was a good time to talk about Leo's physiology once more. Muscle power is not just about weight, Dr. Tunsun explained. It is about cross-sectional area. Force generated by a muscle scales with its cross-sectional area. Leo's muscles show hypertrophy beyond typical lion physiology. That means more fibers packed in the same volume. The result is a density of muscle capable of pulling loads that would break a normal lion. Even so, the energetic cost is enormous. The CGI gave visuals to what the doctor was explaining. Metabolism becomes a problem. Digesting raw organs releases calories but not fast enough to refuel a body in the middle of a multi-kilometer drag. Leo must have had unusually efficient glycogen stores and a metabolic system that prioritized immediate mechanical output over long-term reserves. He burned through stored ATP and then through anaerobic pathways to keep his muscles producing force. That leads to lactic acid, fatigue and pain. Yet if you could keep pushing beyond the fatigue, what Leo did is possible. The overlay showed an anatomical comparison of normal lions and Leo. The audience could see thicker tendons, denser muscle bellies and shortened lever arms at the shoulder that increase mechanical advantage. His unusual habit of training by dragging a carcass also helped him get used to the pulling action, Dr. Tunsun said. The documentary returned to show Leo dragging the carcass over the savannah. He dragged it across rocks, dust, thorn bushes and every obstacle. He seemed possessed. It was baffling why he must do all this. But later, after the episode was over, many claimed that he was like Batman, going through a small training arc before heading to major battles like fighting Superman. That giraffe weighed more than 2,000 kilograms. Leo weighed 400. And yet he dragged it for over 2 kilometers. That was a reminder to us of what a freak of nature he was. After 2 hours, Leo returned to his pride. The lionesses stood and watched him. No one moved. Not a single one approached the carcass until Leo dropped it with a final grunt. He panted hard. The dust lifted around him like a smoky halo. Sarah and Zuri allowed their weak bodies to approach the carcass, which Leo nudged towards them before stepping back. He let them eat first. A true king does not just rule. He protects, and he provides, he said. Leo was indeed a true king. Third POV, documentary episode, 7. Name, Dr. T. Soma Tansan. Role, Lead Researcher. Leo was able to rescue his mother and old lover from the clutches of the enemy, Scar. He went out to hunt for them and took down a full-grown bull giraffe in a display of feats thought to be impossible. And now they were feasting. Dr. Tunsun continued the episode. All seemed well, he said. The documentary showed the whole pride tearing away at the gigantic meal of the giraffe. Nearly 2 tons of pure meat were enough to feed this huge pride for days and still leave leftovers for the vultures to enjoy. The footage showed the pride grooming each other after having the meal. It was one of their social interactions to lick the blood off each other after a meal. Leo himself had 4 females grooming his thick mane. The new members were also welcomed by the pride and even more so by Leo. He would stay close to them, making up for all the lost time by cuddling and rubbing on each other. The sun was rising in the sky, shining its warm light at the lions, who were under a shade now. But we have to remember, there were 2 sides to this story. While one could be sunshine and rainbows, the other could be brewing up disaster, Dr. Tunsun said. And that's what Scar did. The footage cut to the dark and gloomy wasteland of the Pridelands. The camera zoomed in on 3 hyenas that went into the lion's den. That seemed like the most impossible thing. A hyena with the minimal survival instinct to breathe and eat should not be stupid enough to go inside a lion's den. But it didn't just end there. A few moments later, the drone captured these 3 hyenas leaving the lion's den, completely unharmed. An impossible alliance, but proven by nature. This was one of the moments where the saying, "reality is often stranger than fiction," could not have been more right, he said. Scar and his legion of hyenas, now aware of the new challenger, were preparing for a war that would consume the whole of the Pridelands and dictate its future, he said. The 3 hyenas that came out from the den parted ways. They all began moving in their own direction. At first, it was not clear why they would do such a thing. Were they not part of the same clan? Why were they separating? The traditional way lion kings settle disputes is through battle. The winner takes it all. But when 2 lions, each with their own pride, territory and subjects, met in a clash, the result was not just a battle but war, he said. And Scar was gathering his forces. The documentary began showing the events that took place in the next 3 days. All the hyenas all over the Pridelands began gathering. The 3 initial hyenas seemed to be the leaders as they began gathering forces from the north, south, east and west. This was the first sign that the Pridelands was no longer behaving like any ecosystem we recognized. Nature was breaking its own rules. The image transitioned to a wide aerial view of the wasteland. And over the next 3 days, our drones captured perhaps the most astonishing phenomenon ever recorded in the study of terrestrial predators. Time-lapse footage played. The barrens shifted from dawn to dusk. Shadows lengthened and contracted. And from every corner of the land, hyenas began appearing. 1 hyena. Then 3. Then 12. Then 30. Within hours, we were counting them in dozens per frame. The documentary slowed to real time. Hyenas loped over ridges, trotted through dead grass, and emerged from caves, ravines, and dried riverbeds. There seemed to be an invisible call in the air, and each and every hyena in the land was responding to this call. To understand how absurd this is, Tunsun said, we must first understand hyena social structure. Hyenas live in clans. Clans rarely exceed 80 members. These clans are territorially isolated and often violently competitive. They do not merge. They do not unify. They do not answer to a single central authority. A graphic appeared showing typical hyena clan ranges. Small, patchy territories with little overlap. Hyena communication is extremely sophisticated, he continued, but nowhere near the level required for coordinated, long-distance mobilization. No known signal, auditory, chemical, or visual, could summon clan after clan across dozens of kilometers. The footage continued. Hundreds of hyenas now moved across the plain. And yet, they gathered, he said gravely. There was only one way to make this make logical sense. And that was the fact that we were looking at a large hyena clan of over 400 members. That was more than 4 times the number of the largest recorded clan. And they were all unified under the rule of one king. A lion king. Scar. Another drone angle showed a growing tide. By the middle of the second day, we estimated nearly 200 hyenas. By the end of the third, 412. The drone rose above the swarm until the hyenas looked like dark insects crawling across a pale, dying earth. This number is not only unprecedented but it also pushed the boundary of ecological limits. A superclan of this size should collapse under its own food requirements. The metabolic load of 400 scavenger predators cannot be sustained in this environment. There is no prey. There is no carrion. There is no resource to justify their survival, let alone their congregation. A map overlay showed their routes converging on Pride Rock. In front of the king. But still, they came. At the head of the formation were the same 3 hyenas from Scar's den. They were not merely messengers, Tun Sun said. They were leaders. They displayed body posture consistent with dominance in hyenas. The camera showed clusters merging, splitting, then falling into step. This behavior resembles something we see in entirely different branches of the animal kingdom, Tun Sun said. Locusts, for example, undergo what is known as a phase shift. Under extreme ecological pressure, solitary grasshoppers transform into highly cooperative, migratory swarms capable of devastating landscapes. Footage of locust clouds appeared, gray and buzzing. But this, he said, returning to the hyenas, is not insects. This is not simple neural rewiring. These are apex-level carnivores displaying swarm-like behavior with military precision. The hyenas arranged themselves into a crescent shape facing Pride Rock. And then something even stranger happened. The hyenas sat. They waited. Silent. Still. As if awaiting orders. The next frame showed Scar stepping into view atop Pride Rock. And for the first time in recorded zoological history, a lion appeared to command 400 hyenas. Scar's silhouette against the rising sun looked almost mythical. The question was not how Scar controlled them, Tun Sun continued. The real question was why they obeyed. The hyenas lifted their heads. Some chattered, some laughed, and some hollered, while some bowed. But it was clear where they were taking orders from. This gathering represents a level of social coordination unseen in any land predator. It defies everything we know about hierarchy, competition, resource distribution, and ecological stress behavior. They were soldiers. The drone zoomed further back, capturing the entire mass, hundreds of bodies packed densely into a half-moon formation. They were like a lake of blackness and flesh amid the vast wasteland. When asked what this resembled, Tun Sun said, "My colleagues compared it to wolf superpacks, sardine bait balls, elephant matriarch migrations, and even human military formations. But none truly match it. This was something new. Something we might not fully understand even decades from now." Scar roared. And the swarm answered. In a motion so synchronized that it sent chills down our spines, the entire crescent turned. Every head. Every paw. Every gaze. One single movement. Like they were one organism. The hyenas faced the distant slope of the plateau. And they began to run. The audio swelled with the thunder of hundreds of bodies charging across the land. But where? The drone flew in front of them and past them. The drone quickly covered the distance they would cover in time before eventually slowing down at the end of the plateau, and finally, Leo and his pride that were lying down right outside of the plateau. You know where. Third POV, name, Dr. T, Soma Tun Sun role, lead researcher. I will never forget that day, Dr. Tun Sun began with a heavy voice. His eyes stared into the camera, but he saw something else. Maybe he saw the events that completely changed his life a decade ago. The day we questioned the reality we have built upon ourselves as scientists. We like to think we know everything, we like to think we understand. We set up rules, put limitations on Mother Nature and expect her to follow our rules and limitations. As the so-called apex predator on the planet, we had grown arrogant, we thought the world was smaller than us. He exhaled long and slow. We thought we could comprehend nature. As a scientist and a doctor, I thought I knew a lot. Now I know nothing. I am just a small observer, a consciousness that would not be able to see even a century's worth of what nature had to show in billions. I don't know how I ever thought I could understand the world when I'm just the tiniest fraction of it. The wake-up call came in the form of war between two kings. Lion kings. The documentary resumed exactly where episode 7 ended. A drone soaring high above the Pridelands captured a black tide moving across dead Earth. 400 hyenas, dense enough to be a living shadow, advanced like a living, breathing storm. We were at the camp during this event, Tun-san narrated, but even then, we could hear their approach. Our cameramen were controlling drones miles away, and yet the ground beneath us trembled. We all sat around the monitor, and what unfolded on the screen felt mythological. One drone documented the hyena horde, the other tracked Leo and his pride ascending the narrow gorge leading onto the Pridelands. The moment the pride emerged, the scene changed. Lions stepped onto the plateau one by one, sunlight casting long silhouettes behind them. The cubs and juveniles retreated into the gorge as instructed. The adults formed a quiet ring around Leo, their breath steady, their muscles still. They were waiting, not panicking or retreating like expected, but waiting. Leo and his pride did not run. They knew danger was approaching, but they chose to face it head-on in battle. In that moment, I was filled with worry. I still thought I knew better than them. I thought that despite all the intelligence Leo had shown, he was still just a wild animal that did not know his limits, he admitted. The horde grew larger on the horizon. Generations of instinct should have forced the lions to flee. But they did not. And they continued to stand their ground even when they saw the horde coming at them from the horizon. They wanted to fight, Tun-san said. And for the first time, we understood why Leo brought his pride back with him. He needed them, he needed an army to face against Scar and his legion of hyenas. That got us thinking that perhaps the reason why he came and conquered the Serengeti in the first place might just be because of his plan to return and get revenge with proper support behind him. Perhaps sparing the Bali brothers' cubs was not mercy, but strategy. The camera zoomed in on Leo, dark-maned and stepping forward. He stood between the horde of scavengers and his pride. The hyenas finally crossed the last ridge. Their chanting laughter echoed grotesquely. Their formation shifted on instinct, compressing into a crescent as they prepared to strike. Then, Tun-san said quietly, Leo marched forward to greet them. Alone. The two drones converged, finally reunited to film Leo from above at different angles. One was on the lion's side, the other was on the hyenas. The lions behind him did not move. They did not need to. Leo took one breath, chest expanding like a bellows, and he released a powerful roar. The sound that marked the presence of kings. The air shook. Dust rippled across the earth. Hyenas in the front line hesitated mid-stride. And then, Leo began running towards the horde alone while the other lions waited near the gorge. As Leo ran, it was not like when he ran during hunting. The acceleration was not off the charts. Instead, he was slowly building up speed and momentum. He was abusing his incredible mass to build up a devastating first blow. When he neared the horde, Leo took a massive leap and then dove into the army of hyenas. We performed pixel-based measurements. Leo's torque and his acceleration were all outside typical lion ranges. His leap produces force equivalent to a 400-kilogram projectile moving at nearly 50 kilometers per hour. To any organism in his path, that is the kinetic energy of a vehicle running on the road. The drones captured it all. It would be wrong to say Leo ran into the horde, it was more like he ran through the horde like an unstoppable force. His paws hammered the earth. His mane streamed backwards like a black banner caught in a storm. His teeth were bared in hunger for battle. The screen flashed white from dust and impact. Hyenas crumpled beneath him, bones of the smaller predators burst under pressure. Bodies folded like overripe fruit under a hammer. They would have needed 1,000,000 years worth of more evolution to deal with what Leo was giving them. The shockwave and the sound of impact were loud enough to be heard. Not really, but it was something the production team added for dramatics. That is the sound of the first 5 hyenas dying simultaneously. The front line of the horde faltered. Then cracked. Then shattered entirely. Hyenas collided into each other as panic surged through their ranks. In animal behavior, fear spreads faster than aggression, Tunsun explained. This phenomenon, called fear contagion, is typically seen in prey animals. But here we witness it among predators. Leo's opening strike rewrote their expectations. They came expecting lions. They met something else. The footage zoomed out to show the ripple effect. The avalanche of bodies behind collided with the collapsing front line, creating a chaotic bottleneck. The rear hyenas pushed forward while the front tried to flee. The wave destabilized into a churning mess of fur and dust. And then Leo went on an absolute rampage in the midst of their number. The audience watched in utter silence in their home. You could tell from the way Leo was fighting that it was completely different from when he usually did. He looked like an actual monster while tearing away at the hyenas. From a biomechanical standpoint, what happens next should be predictable. A predator's killing efficiency depends on 2 things, strike precision and energy budget. Under normal circumstances, a large feline would pick targets, isolate, and end fights quickly. We have seen Leo using this strategy even against an enemy lion coalition. He kills one quickly, reduces their number and takes them down one by one, he said. But now, Leo used a different tactic. His offense was high momentum and broad area effect. It was an explosion of force designed to take down numbers in an area as large as possible. Leo repeated leaps like a projectile, crushing multiple hyenas with his weight alone without having to expend strength on them one by one, he said. For a few minutes, the documentary showed the rampage of Leo. It was raw, visceral, and brutal. The scene was hard to watch even for adults. It was gore in a way that was real, not like movies that were imitated. But lions were built for bursts of speed, not endurance. After a few minutes passed, you could see Leo starting to slow down. More hyenas were swarming to him when he could make a good empty space before. After letting the audience enjoy the uninterrupted violence, Dr. Tunsun commented again. In the slow-motion sequences from 2 drones, we can study the mechanics of crushing, bite force distribution, bone failure patterns and energy dissipation. Leo employs vertical force, standing on hind legs to leverage body weight or outright leaping and crashing on the hyenas. He also employed horizontal shredding to kill more than 1 hyena with each of his swings. The hyena skeleton is not built for axial compression at that scale. So he was not lunging, pushing or stabbing like he would when fighting prey. Leo knew the difference between here and hunting. He turned himself in a one-man army, a creature of war, not hunt or duels. But as the battle went on and Leo slowed down, the hyenas seemed to gain confidence and they actually began adapting. The horde began swallowing Leo. As the front line collapsed, they turned their attention on Leo's back. The horde began moving around Leo to attack him from behind. But that was when his pride came in. The lions at the gorge had flat ears and bared teeth. And when they saw the horde trying to surround the king, they exploded out too to help. 400 hyenas against Leo and his pride. But when everyone joined the battle, it would seem like the 400 hyenas were the victims. The analysis of this battle alone would take a long time to cover fully. The coordination and strategy performed by Leo and his pride in this battle is enough for researchers to study for years. We no longer can cover all that in this episode, so see you next time. End of episode 7. Comments. Nazir. The documentary completely glossed over the fact that hyenas should not be physically capable of forming such a stable mass charge without fracturing limbs from self-collision. At that density, the back line should have crushed the front line before Leo even arrived. Something else was coordinating them. Worse today, Leo yeeted himself like a furry freight train, and I respect that deeply. Lelouch R1, the episode implied fear contagion began after Leo's first impact, but hyena posture before contact shows microsubmission signals. The fear started earlier. The animal sensed something was wrong long before the hit. Possibly because they had a history with Leo himself. Junior Chan, why add fake sound effects for dramatic impact? These events are already impossible enough. Stop making it, Marvel. Nick Pearson, not enough discussion on how starvation and ecological collapse pushed the hyenas into this behavior. The documentary leaned too heavily into mythical framing. Deluzum, Jay-Z, my guy folded those hyenas like laundry fresh out of the dryer. Jackson Terry, the part where the hyenas reorganize from collapse into encirclement is the most terrifying example of emergent swarm intelligence I have ever seen. We need models for this. Kaizo, you can literally see 4 different hyena clans that should hate each other running side by side. This is ecologically absurd. I love it. Lance Dixon, the documentary failed to mention something crucial. Hyenas rarely retreat in synchronized waves. So while the front lines retreated, the backlines pushed forward. That alone should cause many injuries, not only from Leo. Damon Morado, Leo charging alone was the most metal thing I have ever witnessed. Key Sean Lewis, I calculated the force of Leo's landing. My estimates are between 25,000 and 30,000 newtons at initial impact. That is elephant tier striking power. How is this real? Rylobel, great episode but way too focused on cinematic shock instead of educational framing. I want numbers, not jump cuts. Victor Mendez, the way the pride just watched Leo go, that is absolute trust. Or absolute insanity. Possibly both. Not that important, Leo is built different. Built illegally. Chza. Leo's combat movements resemble those predicted for prehistoric Mecharodont predators, not modern lions. We may be watching an evolutionary throwback. Ken Jenkins, no one is talking about how the vultures knew exactly where to fly. They were circling before the first kill. Incredible ecological awareness. Iman, I want a full episode dedicated to the biomechanics of Leo's jaw. That bite-through skull moment was sped up. I want the raw footage. Saul Aguilar Luna, no. Nope. I refuse. Another cliffhanger? Emmanuel, come outside, we just want to talk. Carlos Gabriel Yanez Lopez, BRO, we watched Leo solo a small army and you cut right when the lionesses joined? Emma Nanuil. Job Destin, the documentary barely touched on the psychological side of the battle. Morale collapse decides most real-world animal conflicts. I want analysis on how Leo's opening attack nuked the horde's willingness to fight. Hopefully next episode. GGG. Every nerd is complaining about making this too epic but doesn't realize this is the way to attract everyone and make it popular. If it's just science and numbers, it won't reach the people. Only nerds. First POV, 1 month later, my cubs are simply the cutest. I said, absolutely swooning at the 9 little cubs in front of me. The clues of me being a doting father were there. But it was much worse than expected. I had always found cubs cute, going as far as sparing my rival's cub and spoiling Scar's cub when they were born. I was fond of them, these innocent little creatures, no different from kittens. And now that these cubs were made from my blood and flesh, the emotion I felt towards them was unthinkable. I think I might just murder the ecosystem if they asked me. The cubs were 1 month old now. They were able to see, run, and even play. Albeit they were still extremely uncoordinated and would tumble constantly. But I feel like those only added to their charm. Zuri had 3 cubs in total. She was the only one who bore me 3 cubs, while the rest bore me 2 each. Her cubs also consisted of 2 males and 1 female, although there was a little confusion in the beginning. It was hard to know the gender of the cubs when they were infants. Nala had 2 cubs, male and female. Amara had 2 cubs, male and female. Tala also had 2 cubs, but both of them turned out to be female. After they could open their eyes and move around, they began showing their individuality. It was only then that I and the mothers began naming the cubs. With Zuri, we named our cubs Asafa, Shaka, and Amila. With Nala, we named our cubs Aslan and Kiara. With Amara, we named our cubs Kion for the male and Zola for the female. With Tala, we named our cubs Shuri and Zulu. In total, I named 5 of my cubs. All the male cubs and 1 female cub I had with Tala. The cubs stayed in front of me, carefully studying my mannerisms and body language. They could not even speak properly yet, so they shouldn't even know how heartstruck I was by their existence alone. But even when they were barely able to run, they were already showing respect and obedience towards me. This was just a nature they copied from their mother, and the first thing they learned. Father was king, respect the king. Always. They didn't have to be taught. They simply learned it from their surroundings that all saw me as king. Although that was a good thing, I'd honestly prefer they only see me as a father first and learn to respect me later. But maybe that was just the human part of me talking. I leaned my head down for them. It was a rare action I took only for them. You wouldn't see me bowing like this to anyone else. The little cubs knew what to do with that action. They ran up to me and one by one, they clung to my thick mane. They were still so small compared to me. I could probably gobble them all up in one bite. After everyone climbed on my mane, I lifted my head. But not too much as to not hurt them in case they fall. And then I began moving gently. They released tiny screams, whines, and giggles as we played the game of who could hang on the longest. After a minute, and after increasing my actions, they fell one by one. Until in the end, only Asafa and Aslan were left. A few seconds later, Asafa dropped from my mane and that made Aslan the winner. We have the winner. Baby Aslan wins this match. I said and lowered my head so that the small cub could climb down safely. The moment he touched the ground, he was tackled to the ground by Asafa, who was a competitive spirit. And then their other siblings joined in and swarmed him too. In the end, they made a cluster of cubs and play fought with their non-existent teeth. I sat down and simply watched them play with a smile. I could watch them all day. No, I could watch them forever. Unlike the other lions who avoided cubs at all costs, my favorite activity now was to babysit my new cubs. I would often abandon hunting and training just to be with them. But never patrolling, though. My protective instinct actually made me patrol more and more aggressively towards any rogues and things I considered a threat. After I played with the cubs and then watched them play among themselves, I decided that it was time to stop. Young cubs like them still needed lots of sleep and milk. That was how I grew as strong as I did when I was still a cub. So after an hour, I released a small growl towards them. The small cubs that could still not understand words understood fear. They fled from me and quickly found comfort and safety in their respective mothers. I hated to do that, but it was the only way I could command them at the moment. I watched them scatter one by one and go to their mothers, who put them under their bellies so that they could drink their milk and sleep. A few minutes after they left, a huge block of stone bumped into my side. No, not a block of stone. They were my other cubs. Oh, were you jealous of your siblings? I asked while knocking the baby rhino with my shoulder. But the little beast was so heavy and sturdy it barely felt my push. And then another baby rhino came to the opposite side, seeking affection too. I gave them plenty. I used my paws to scratch them all over their body without using my claws. They were like living tanks with the nature of dogs, to be honest. Jumbo and Mambo had grown to ridiculous proportions in just 1 month. Their speed of growth was something that shadowed even mine. In just 1 month, they gained a good 50 kilograms of mass. At least that's what the humans who monitored them regularly said. Speaking of which, at the start, the humans tried to take them away from me. But they knew better after I warned them a few times. Now they came every 2 days or so to check on the rhinos. The humans and the baby rhinos had grown close too. Mostly due to the humans providing milk and nutrients, which I could not provide for them in their development. At just 6 or 7 months old, they were nearing my weight. Although their dimensions were not comparable to mine, they were compact and extremely bulky. Seeing them like this saddened me about the dead rhino I saw a month ago. The poachers who killed the male white rhino. What a majestic beast that would be while alive. And what a great fight I could have if I decided to do so. I played with the baby rhinos for half an hour before I headed towards my pride. Social interaction was vital for a lion's pride, so I had to be included in it. But the so-called social interaction mostly ends with me on top of 3 or 4 females. After that, the sun was starting to head down and it was time to go on a patrol. The Serengeti was in full bloom at this time of the year. The wet season was starting to peak, meaning there was plenty of green and water wherever you went. I wandered through my usual patrol routes, releasing occasional roars that marked my presence to any outsiders. I moved through the tall grass at an unhurried pace, for I truly owned this land. My huge weight made my paws sink into the damp earth. The ground was soft from the recent rains, cool beneath my pads. This land was healthy. Herds grazed freely in the distance. Zebras lifted their heads when they heard my approach, their ears twitching. But they did not flee immediately. Wildebeests snorted and shuffled, uncertain whether to panic or continue feeding. They knew me. They knew my scent, my routes, and my rhythm. They knew their king. And they knew I was not hunting them. I walked past an acacia tree where I had fought a coalition not too long ago. The smell of blood was still there, and the bark still bore faint scars from claws and teeth. I climbed a low rise and stopped there, overlooking a wide stretch of plains. From this height, I could see almost everything. There were watering holes glittering in the distance, patches of darker grass where the soil was richer, and herds moving like slow rivers across the land. Prey were everywhere in the central Serengeti. The pride, without any other competition, could choose any meal. I took in the clean air and basked in the setting sun. This was my kingdom. I released a low rumble from my chest, not a full roar of aggression, but more like a declaration of presence. The sound rolled outward, deep and steady, carried by the wet season air. Back where I left my pride, the lionesses answered my call. I smiled. It was peaceful. For the first time ever since I was reborn as a lion, I allowed myself to relax fully and deeply. Maybe half a year of peace had softened me, or maybe it was the cubs. Or maybe it was neither. Maybe it was because there was nothing chasing me and nothing I was chasing either. I've killed Scar, built my own kingdom, reclaimed the Serengeti, and now I am a father. My thoughts drifted back to the cubs. I couldn't help it. I thought more about the male cubs. I was a bit biased because they were the ones who would carry my legacy. I thought about Aslan, who clung stubbornly to my mane, Asafa, who had a competitive glare even as a newborn, Shaka, who was always quiet with watchfulness, and then Kayan, who was always so shy. They were my future. Conquest had never truly called to me. I had taken land because I had to. I had fought for survival and peace because their price was violence. But ruling everything? Expanding endlessly? That was never my nature. I could if I wanted to, but I wouldn't. I think I would be content with keeping the peace and simply watching my cubs and my pride grow. I continued my patrol for a few more minutes. Then I stopped to drink from a shallow stream. After I had quenched my thirst, I looked at my reflection in the clear water. The lion staring back at me was massive and a little scarred. He was heavy with muscle, mane dark and full. A king and a monster in every sense of the word. Too big to fail, some might say. Too strong to fall again. It was hard to believe that it was me. Perhaps this was the end of my climb, the end of my story. I was strong enough to sustain and enjoy peace. There was nothing waiting for me in the future, nothing more I needed to accomplish, nor threats I needed to kill. My cubs would grow up, and I would grow old. And the rest would be history. It was a hard but memorable journey. I think this was it. My happily ever after. Third POV. Masai Mara. The Masai Mara lay stripped bare under the dry season sun. Grass that once rippled like green water had faded into brittle gold. Dust hung permanently in the air, clinging to hides and throats alike. The rivers had narrowed into sluggish veins, their banks crowded with hoofprints and bones. Every sound carried farther in the open land. Every mistake was seen. While the Serengeti was paradise, the Masai Mara was hell. It was the season of challenge for the lions. It was during this time that lone lions were no longer satisfied with a small corner of the land. They needed a large territory to secure the small prey. Life needed to fight for the right to live. So a call rang out across the plains. It was not a foreign sound. The roars of lions announcing their presence and challenging kings had grown far too common, like the crowing of a rooster in the morning. The roar this time was deep, raw, and unrefined. It was not the roar of a seasoned ruler but the voice of youth sharpened by hunger and desperation. It rolled over the savannah, bounced off distant kopjes, and faded into the heat haze. Then another roar backed it up. This roar was higher pitched. It was rougher and angrier. These two roars fused into one, like two sounds were dancing. It became clear that two lions were in a coalition. Two lions in one challenge. They stood at the edge of a withered acacia grove, ribs faintly visible beneath scarred hides. Brothers by blood, perhaps, or rivals bound only by circumstance. Their manes were uneven, still growing into their weight. They looked strong but untested. They were hungry, but not foolish. The place where they stood provided cover, whereas the surrounding land was bare. That meant they could see any approaching threat while they remained unseen. They could also run away in case something bigger than they could handle responded to their call. They stayed in their place, releasing roars of challenge. Eventually, two figures made their way towards them. Their figures were blurry due to the heat in the air. 2 for 2, one of the lions said, Zirith. We can take them, the other lion, Rakai, said. Zirith and Rakai were blood brothers who came from the same pride. At the age of 4 years old, they were reaching their prime, though they had more room to grow. Perhaps that was also why they were a bit too arrogant for their own good. Scarface and Baraka approached. And the closer they got to the challengers, the more fearful and nervous they grew. Scarface was first among the two. His blackened mane caught the sunlight like oil, heavy and full, framing a face marked by age and experience. The scars on his face and body spoke of tremendous battle survived. This was a veteran. A beast that faced a bigger beast and survived. The two challengers could not help but think that they might only turn into one of those many scars. Only leaving a small reminder while they perished. Baraka came in second. He was a monster and a beast. From far away, he looked as big as Scarface, who walked in front of him. But when they got close, it was clear that Baraka was a giant. Settling at the weight of 300 kilograms, he was the biggest lion in the Masai Mara, surpassing even his own father by a good 20 kilograms. But he was not a white lion like his father was, although his mane was much lighter colored and thicker than Scarface's. By that point, it was too late to run. The two challengers, Rakai and Zirith, stepped out from the cover of the trees and headed towards the two kings. 4 lions met in the middle of the plain under the cruel sun. Baraka and Scarface stood side by side. Their figures were effortlessly intimidating. Meanwhile, the two challengers trembled nervously and bared their teeth. They were doing too much just to prove they were not scared. "You called and we came," Scarface said the first words. "What now, young bloods? Are you just going to stand there?" Baraka scoffed. "Look at them, they are scared. Do we really need them? They look like a waste of time." Pride. A lion is pride and pride is a lion. It was not just some attribute or a trait of lions. It was an identity. The two challengers immediately exploded into rage after the disrespect. They might not die for food, and they might not die for females. But for their pride, they would walk off a cliff without flinching. So they chose violence. Zirith and Rakai exploded one after the other. Rakai moved first, perhaps due to being the stronger one or the more prideful one. In response, Scarface did not move. Baraka did. The massive lion stepped forward, planting himself between Scarface and the oncoming challengers like a living wall. His shoulders rolled once, muscles shifting beneath his hide like boulders grinding together. "He's fast," Scarface commented only. After reaching Baraka, Rakai leapt into the air like a wild cat. His claws were extended and swiping right for the head. It was a violent, aggressive attack that had all hopes relying on the attack landing. It would be enough to put down a lion. It probably worked in the few battles he had been in. But Baraka merely took a single step back. Now Rakai was leaping at the wrong target. His claws could not reach him now. Baraka moved with learned ease. Then he swatted the challenger away in the air like he was a fly. It was not a slash. It was not even a strike. It was an imitation of something he had seen months ago. Of a bigger lion swatting away another lion and planting his face into a tree. Fighting had not seemed so easy. It was almost like breathing to him. Although Baraka was nowhere near that level, his imitation and learned move were enough to deal with the young challenger. Rakai's body twisted sideways as Baraka's foreleg smashed into his ribs with bone-crushing force. The challenger hit the ground hard, skidding through dust and gravel, coughing as the air was knocked from his lungs. "You can't dodge midair, stupid," Baraka sneered. Zirith came next. He veered sharply, angling towards the flank of Baraka. His teeth were bared, and he lunged at Baraka in a horizontal line. He did not recklessly leap like his brother. The king of the Masai Mara eyed the incoming danger before he turned, turning the hard-earned flank into a frontal assault with that simple move. Baraka took another step back, his paw rising into the air. Ziritha's jaws snapped shut on empty air. Their mistake was attacking like Baraka would be an unmoving boulder that would not change position. Right then, a paw slammed onto the top of his head. The force was enough to knock his body limp. He plants his face into the sand. Zirith snarled, waking up instantly before he thrashed around in panic, thinking that Baraka would have followed up on the strike. He stirred up a cloud of dust in his violence before finally seeing Baraka standing still. He lunged for a second time. Baraka did not move this time, so his claws raked across the chest, drawing thin lines of blood. But the giant did not react. Zirith stumbled back, shocked to see his attack doing nothing. Baraka turned his head towards Scarface in a deadpan. "Are you sure you want them?" "I think they'll die from his breath," he said. "Keep going." "I think they have potential," Scarface insisted with a shake of his head. So Baraka turned back to Zirith. "Try again." Words that hit harder than claws. Zirith stood up and charged low, trying to get beneath Baraka's center of mass. It was a smart move, although it looked more desperate than anything. Baraka actually raised an eyebrow at that before letting him do as he liked. Zirith felt like he had hit a mountain. Baraka only slid back a few inches before he came to a stop. Absolutely no power. You would be a twig to him, he said before shifting his weight onto his front legs. Baraka's jaw opened and snapped shut around Zirith's scruff before lifting him whole. It was one of the insane sights you could witness. A lion lifting another lion. Zirith yelped, legs flailing uselessly, before Baraka flung him aside. The challenger landed awkwardly, rolling across the ground before scrambling back to his feet, breathing hard. While Baraka was dealing with Zirith, Rakai charged and leapt on him once more. He managed to slam into the giant, making him stumble. He climbed the back of Baraka before sinking his jaws onto the shoulder. He bit hard. God knows he bit hard. He bit as hard as he could. But again, Baraka moved with imitation. He stood on his hind legs, reached for Rakai's mane and held it tight with claws from both paws. And then, boom, he threw Rakai over his shoulder in a throw. Rakai's back hit the ground hard, his eyes turning white, spit spilling from his mouth and mixing with blood. Baraka merely scoffed. Then he turned towards Scarface, who nodded his head. "Stand," he said. But the two challengers seemed scared to do so. They scurried in the dirt, not standing but not lying too low either. Their tails flickered in humiliation and irritation. The two shared a look and then seemed to agree on something. Then they exploded out, steering clear of the giant and heading straight for Scarface. They were not deeply injured by Baraka, who went extremely easy on them, so they moved fast, almost fresh from any battle. "You fools!" Baraka screamed at their backs, but it was too late. They committed a grave mistake. Scarface did not retreat. He did not even shift his stance. As Zirith and Rakai split wide, circling him like starving dogs around an old bull, Scarface simply lowered his head and waited. His breathing was steady. They could see the many scars on his flank, which looked like weakness compared to Baraka's mostly unmarked skin. It was proof that he could be harmed. They thought they could harm him too. The challengers mistook that stillness for weakness. He should be weaker than Baraka. If they killed him here, at least they could regain some of their pride. Rakai lunged first again. Not a leap this time. He rushed low and fast, aiming for Scarface's legs, hoping to take away his balance. Zirith followed a heartbeat later, angling for the throat, teeth bared, eyes burning. It was a simultaneous attack, something they did not even attempt against Baraka. Scarface moved. He stepped forward, not back. Again, a direct contrast to Baraka, who always stepped back. Rakai's charge slid past him, claws scraping uselessly through dirt as Scarface did a small hop to evade the low charge. Then his mouth opened, his jaws revealing sharp canines. He did not bite but simply crashed his teeth into the head of Zirith, who was leaping higher. Again, an imitation. His canines punched into the charging Zirith. The challenger's own momentum betrayed him and caused his end. The clash ended violently. The explosion of flesh caused a cloud of dust to erupt. There seemed to be a shockwave as well as the cloud pushing outward. And then came silence. Baraka stared. When the smoke cleared, only one figure was standing. "They are too reckless and still chained by pride," Scarface said with a sigh. Although they were kings, they were no longer chained by pride. In fact, they did not have pride anymore. It was robbed from them. In the end, to follow their plan, they needed lions who were not so hopelessly burdened by pride. "Let's go and look for others," he said, walking past Baraka. Baraka looked at Scarface's back before briefly turning back to the cloud of dust. It had settled now, and two bodies lay there. He sighed. And simply followed Scarface once more. Third POV, Masai Mara. The Masai Mara was dying. Not in some dramatic, sudden way. Not with fire or floods or screaming skies. It was dying slowly, quietly, the way living things did when stretched beyond what they were meant to endure. The grass had lost its softness months ago. What remained was brittle, yellowed, and sharp enough to cut paw pads if pressed too hard. Dust clung to everything. It settled in fur, in the nostrils, and in old wounds that never truly healed for the lions living here. A consequence of Leo's dominance. All lions had fled the Serengeti and were now fighting for the Masai Mara. You might think that since Leo was in his father's stage and not killing as many lions as before, the lions would be safe. No. His presence alone had led the species to slaughter each other for limited land and resources. He was driving his own blood extinct while doing nothing. The fact that he had and would have many cubs in the future was the only saving grace. 2 lions lay pressed into the earth. They were 2 of the many rogue lions living here and fighting for opportunity. These 2 showed more promise than the previous duo, Scarface said as he looked at the 2 challengers groveling on the ground. They were not down due to severe injuries, more like completely exhausted than anything. Their bodies struggled to regain lost strength. They had no more fuel in the tank. Perhaps if they had not been starving before the fight, they would be able to get up. You don't say, Baraka deadpanned, his body full of red and injury from the fight. He stood over the challengers, his massive body still tense, still ready despite the damage he had taken. Deep claw marks crossed both sides of his ribs. Blood soaked his fur so thoroughly that his original color was almost impossible to see beneath the red. One eye was swollen nearly shut. His muzzle was split, teeth bared in irritation rather than threat. He looked like something dragged out of a battlefield. Meanwhile, Scarface was all clean and unharmed. The 2 challengers were named Ash and Vesh. They were young, but not inexperienced. 5 years old and nearing the peak of their prime. They had shown brilliant resilience and intelligence against the might of Baraka, nearly taking him down. Baraka was supposed to be the strongest among all of the lions in the Masai Mara. Although he would never win in a fight against Scarface. But the point is, even though he would not win, Baraka was bigger, stronger, faster, and meaner than Scarface. He was the strongest lion based purely on merit, not result. So it spoke a lot that he was struggling against these 2 lions who were not fully healthy and had starved for weeks even before the fight. Under proper guidance, they had the potential to be much more. Stay down, Scarface said to the 2 challengers trying to rise. Stay down and listen to me, he said. The 2 challengers finally slowed their movement and just lay there. You fought well, Scarface began with praise. Too well for me to find it reasonable to turn you into corpses today and never let the world see what you could have been. Kings. Scarface began pacing around them. His presence was domineering and held a charm unique to him. It was the same character that made him the leader among his brothers. The 2 of you are strong and in your prime. You should be the kings of your land and have your own pride to command. If this were any other time, that would be exactly what would happen. So answer me this, why is that not the case? Scarface asked. Silence. A weird kind of silence fell on the battlefield as the 2 challengers looked at each other, confused. Don't you have answers? Scarface inquired. I don't know what you're babbling about, old man. We are not strong enough, and that is all there is to it, Ash said from the ground. His name was fitting because his body was the color of ash, unlike the other lions. Oh, but that's where you are wrong. You are strong enough, Scarface said. It's just that the shortage of land and resources has made the competition so tough that even exceptional lions like you cannot thrive, he said. He towered over the fallen lions, letting them see the seriousness in his face. He was not mocking them. He was not being sarcastic. What he said, he believed to be true. What do you mean? Vesh asked, his teeth bared in irritation. But Scarface did not answer and simply asked another question. He did not want to tell them the answer. He wanted them to find it on their own. Tell me, why did you come here in the first place? Scarface asked. Don't screw with me. We came here to fight for this land. To become kings, Ash answered. I understand. But why here out of all places? Why have you come to fight for this corner of dry grass? A place you know full well is ruled by a large coalition of lions? Scarface said. You're not stupid. At least I don't think you two are. You have seen the shortage of prey here. You have seen the competition. There were wounds already on your bodies even though we'd never met. That meant you had to fight rogue lions, not even kings. That was how many lions are fighting over this land, he said. So why come here? Why not fight for some other land? Scarface asked again. Why not become the king of, I don't know, the Serengeti? That land is in the wet season right now, green for the taking. The Serengeti is also more than twice the size of the whole Masai Mara. Silence. The two challengers looked at each other, frowning hard now. Then they turned back to Scarface. You know why, Ash said as he pushed himself up and glared at Scarface. Don't take us to be naive just because of our youth, he said and turned to show the old scars on his body. They were huge scars visible even through the new blood and the fresh wound sustained in the recent battle. Scarface looked at that. At the impossible claw marks that were too wide to be that of a lion's. Trying to take over the Serengeti is the same as running off a cliff. Every lion knows that now. The stories are written in the blood of those who didn't believe in those stories, Ash said. I was one of them. When I was younger, I and my blood brothers went there. We were so arrogant, so confident of taking land owned by a single lion. We thought that since we were three, nothing could stand in front of us, Ash said as he told the story, and Scarface listened carefully. Only I survived. Me too, Vesh said as he pushed himself to the side, showing his underbelly and the nasty scars that still remain to this day. I lost my brother the last time I was foolish enough to venture into the Serengeti, he said. Scarface showed an angry snarl. Leo. You are talking about the lion Leo. Both challengers seemed to flinch at the name, as if it was a name that should be feared even when uttered aloud. Leo, 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 Scarface rapped like a madman. The thing that ruled the whole of the Serengeti. The king was so greedy he swallowed everything whole without giving anyone else a chance. He would let prey die of old age before letting outsiders get a full belly. The two challengers looked at him like he was crazy. Do you know the situation of the Masai Mara? Scarface asked. It is so much smaller than the Serengeti, but 9 lion prides have to live here somehow. I and my pride occupy half of it, and the other half of the land is shared by 8 lion prides, when in history no more than 5 prides used to exist in this land. You might fear him, but you can't deny it. Leo is the problem, Scarface said. He is a problem that needs a solution. The sheer anger and determination were something they had never seen before in another lion. Scarface sounded bitter, yet sure. His eyes were furious, yet firm in their goal. What are you getting on with this? Ash asked. Scarface turned to walk away and answered. I'm building an army that consists of many kings with no land to rule. Half kings that wish to be whole. Lions strong enough to rule but denied the chance, he said. It is a coalition of brothers the likes of which the world has never seen. Our goal is to free the Serengeti of the monster known as Leo and share the land between us. Reclaim what was stolen from us, he said. A monster? Vesh asked while still on the ground. You do not believe him to be a lion, do you? You've seen him. You fought him. I did too, and I can attest that he is no lion. He is not even a beast, Scarface said. Leo is a mistake of nature. A curse on the living. A curse for the lion species as a whole. And my plan is to correct that, he said, turning back to them and taking a moment for his words to sink in. So join me, Ash, Vesh. Let us stop this useless fighting between us and turn towards the true and real enemy, he said, his voice clearer, almost a whisper. We will free the Serengeti of its monster. And then we shall split the land between us. We can go back to our old ways, fighting each other for pride and something worth bleeding for, not just scraps, he said. I am going to restore balance in the ecosystem, and I could use your help, he said. The two lions looked at each other once more before giving a hard nod. Ash helped Vesh to his feet, and then the two of them stepped in front of Scarface. His eyes seemed contagious as the two challengers met them. Revenge will only be the thing that makes this sweeter, Scarface said. Third POV, the walk back to camp was slow. All the lions except Scarface had been in an intense battle, so they had to stop multiple times during the journey back. But now they were nearing the so-called camp. Ash and Vesh knew it because they felt a presence. Ash felt it first. His ears flicked back, nostrils flaring despite the ache in his chest. He slowed without realizing it. Vesh noticed a moment later. Do you smell that? He muttered. Scarface did not answer. They crested a low rise, barely more than a swell in the land. And then the camp came into view. Ash stopped dead. Vesh's breath caught in his throat. Below them, spread across a wide stretch of open ground broken by rocks and sparse acacia trees, lay lions. Male lions like they were a big pride. They weren't acting like rogue males either, they acted like they were together. They act like a proper coalition. But the sheer magnitude of their number was astounding. 13 male lions. Ash counted them twice to be sure. 17, including them. They stood or lay in loose formation, some resting, some watching the plains, others grooming scars with slow, practiced movements. Their manes varied in color and thickness, some dark and heavy, others ragged and thin from past hardship. Every single one bore scars. Old ones. New ones. Marks of battle survived, not avoided. These were not cubs playing at dominance. These were grown lions. Full males. Kings, or lions who should have been. That's not possible, Vesh said quietly. Ash didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the sight before him. In the Masai Mara, two adult males tolerating each other for more than a few days was rare. 3 invited bloodshed. Anything beyond that simply did not exist. Males killed each other for less. For territory scraps. For pride rights that barely fed them. And yet here they were. 17 of them, standing together. Don't be too surprised, the numbers will only grow, Baraka said while moving past them to join the group. They felt something cold slide down his spine. Fear at first, but then a satisfaction unlike anything before. Yes. This will be more than enough to kill that monster. What stood before them was not a pride or a coalition. It was an army. It was the personification of nature trying to correct a mistake and restore balance. First POV, be calm, Nala, they don't mean harm, I said gently to the suspicious mother as the humans went near the cubs to examine them. I allowed them to be near my cubs because I knew they could help them in case of diseases and also monitor their health. I wanted my cubs to be healthy. In the wild, the survival of cubs was less than half. I wanted to make sure my cubs were not on the wrong side of the probability scale. The humans were also ones I trusted, Hannah and Dr. Tunsun. They had brought a bag and a small weighing scale. It was a platform scale, the type often used to weigh vegetables in supermarkets. They had done the same thing to the other cubs. Nala's cubs were the last because she was the least on board with the whole letting a hairless monkey touch the cubs. But when Nala saw the softness and the gentleness with which they handled Kiera, her doubts started to melt away. 7 kilograms from Kiera at 1 month old, Hannah said when she gently put her on the scale. Dr. Tunsun jotted down on a notebook, like expected, every cub is on the higher end of the expected weight at 1 month. Well, they have a big father, Hannah said, softly patting Kiera, who quickly walked off the scale. The steel platform was different from the soil of the savannah, and cubs were not too comfortable with new things at this stage. It was cold too. Kiara ran away from Hannah's grasp and buried herself under Nala's belly. They are adorable. I know, humans. I know. Up next, the last male cub, Hannah said, and looked at Aslan, who was peeking out from behind his mother. Nala was lying sideways on the ground, and he was mounting her giant body with his small frame. His eyes were not fearful like his sister's. He was studying, he was curious, but at the same time, he was cautious. Aslan, I called the cub, and he responded. They couldn't talk or understand yet, but they knew their name. Go, I said, gesturing with my head. It seemed he understood my body language because he slid off his mother and slowly approached the humans. When Hannah tried to grab him, he lowered his body and made the fur on his back stand up like a cat. Hannah quickly retracted her hands. Of his own accord, Aslan went and climbed on top of the scale. 11 kilograms, Hannah said, looking at Dr. Tunsun in astonishment. That's the biggest cub in the pride. And also might be the biggest measured 1 month old. I smiled, prideful. Let me just. Hannah said and began looking at his body. She searched for any signs of infection or injury. After finding none, she softly nudged at his behind to make him climb off the scale. He turned to me while returning to his mother, and I gave a soft smile and a nod to show that he did a good job. His tail wagged and he shyly went back to his mother. That's all the data we need, Hannah said with a smile. They are growing a bit faster than other cubs, but that's all within our expectation. The father's genes and the splendid diet of the mother were bound to make them grow. Thank you for letting us see your children, Dr. Tunsun turned to me and said, like he knew I could understand him. I could, but I shouldn't be. He was truly a madman. I rewarded him by nodding. See that? Did you see that? He understood. Dr. Tunsun said excitedly. Calm down, doctor, he is just mirroring your action, Hannah said while pushing at him to stand. No, I will do it again. Thank you, he said again, this time without a bow. I gave him a blank stare. That doesn't prove anything. He responded the first time. Dr. Tunsun said as they walked away from the pride. I chuckled seeing that. I turned to the mother and gave her affection for going with my words even though she was against it at the start. After a few minutes of staying with Nala, I got up and walked towards the humans. Their vehicle and makeshift camp were not that far away from where the pride was currently staying, so I reached there in a short time. The nomadic life of the pride was put on hold for the moment because it was difficult to move around with the cubs. But let a few months pass and we should be moving again, albeit a little slower and more infrequently. But to make up for the dominant king staying in one place, I had lots of hyenas under me now. They kept the challengers out of my territory in the land where my presence was barely known. And if a huge coalition appeared, it was just a matter of them telling me and I would just take a few days' trip to eliminate them. When trouble arises, so does a solution. When I reached the human camp, it was much more comfortable than expected. They had proper tents and a campfire place that had seen some frequent use. Since the pride was not moving too much, they weren't either. There were 2 vehicles in the scene, one where the researchers moved around and another that was reserved for carrying supplies. I didn't need to search to see the reason why I came here. Jumbo, Mamo, I called out their names. The 2 rhinos turned to me, their snouts completely drenched in white liquid. In front of them was a large plastic tub that was surrounded by rocks to make sure it didn't tip over or move. A 6 or 7-month-old calf still needed milk. And since I wouldn't allow them to take away my 2 babies, the humans were forced to compensate in any way. One of them was by giving them milk like this to make sure they could grow even while being at my pride. The 2 of them left their milk tub and jogged towards me. They didn't come to a pause when they reached me, so I had to brace myself. 2 calves that didn't know how big they were or how strong they were slammed into my body and I braced myself and stopped them. Had I been a lesser lion, I would have been folded. "Are you having a good time?" I asked while raking my claws down their growing hides. I did not apply pressure, so they liked the scratching. "Yes, yes," they answered. The baby rhinos could speak words now, albeit they still didn't really talk. But it was a huge improvement. They were also not as fearful of the humans as the lions. Since the humans literally replaced their mother's milk, they were attached and knew the humans were harmless. I led the two of them to the milk tub, where they continued feeding. Their diet was a 30/70ths mix between grazing grass and drinking the milk. They were slowly reducing their need for milk, and pretty soon, they would grow only by grazing alone. I played with the growing giants for a while before we all headed back towards the Pride. After everything was settled and I stayed with the Pride for a few hours, it was time to go on an afternoon patrol again. It was the same routine every day. A routine I enjoyed very much and planned to keep doing forever. I'd tear anything that stood in my way. Third POV, for another 2 months, life moved forward in a rare state of balance. The Pride remained settled, anchored by the presence of newborn cubs and the silent authority of their king. The grass was still green then, nourished by lingering rains. Prey moved in steady herds, predictable and plentiful. The rivers ran full, their banks soft and dark with moisture. Nights were cool, days were warm, and hunger was a distant concern rather than a constant threat. The cubs grew quickly. Too quickly, Leo might have said. They learned to walk with confidence, their legs still unsteady but strengthening by the day. They tumbled over one another, bit tails, climbed over sleeping adults, and tested their small voices in clumsy roars that drew indulgent glances rather than reprimands. Mothers remained watchful but relaxed. There was no immediate danger that required sharpened instincts. Even the orphaned rhino calves continued to thrive. They were quickly growing into the living tanks nature designed them to be. Leo had the absolute pleasure of watching them grow. The Serengeti continued in peace. There were challengers here and there. A few coalitions that needed to be humbled after they survived the clan of hyenas. But there was nothing too serious. It was Leo's happily ever after indeed. But if one observed closely, they would be able to tell that perhaps peace was not peace, but a silence before disaster. The rare sightings of challengers could be attributed to Leo's absolute dominance. But it could mean one thing and also another. Leo continued to grow as well. He was slowly approaching 5 years old, and although his body was reaching its prime and growth had stalled, he still grew closer to half a ton. The closer he got to being 5 years old, the closer he got to 500 kilograms. It was oddly perfect in a way. But the growing size and power did not truly mean an increase in aggression. After a long life where he had to be pushed by threats and goals to be violent and angry, his current stage in life had taught him to be soft and gentle. With the decrease in challengers and most of them being picked apart by hyenas, Leo had to find alternative ways to keep himself sharp. He brought up his old training routines, took more part in hunting down giants, and often wrestled with the two rhinos to build strength. When his cubs turned 2 months old, Leo celebrated by taking down a giraffe, much to their astonishment. Not like they could eat meat at their age, but Leo let them play on the fallen prey. And when the cubs turned 3 months old, they experienced a big change in their lives. The wet season was coming to an end. The rain began to falter subtly at first. Storms grew shorter and clouds passed without releasing their burden. Patches of grass yellowed, then browned. Mud cracked along riverbanks, shallow channels shrinking day by day. The change was slow enough that life continued as if nothing was wrong, until one morning it was impossible to ignore. The dry season had come yet again. The Pride had adapted to the dry seasons. Not only was the whole of Serengeti theirs, but also their main source of diet was not going anywhere during the dry season. In fact, it was actually easier to hunt buffalo in this season. But the lack of prey was only one of the challenges brought by the dry season. And Leo learned soon enough that this season would bring with it many unexpected hurdles. Happily ever after was a myth. Because life was a bitch like that. My lord, my lord, my lord. Grim came flying towards Leo as he was on his usual morning patrol. It was a day in the early dry season. The rhinos. The rhino calves. Grim said, stopping above Leo. What is it, Grim? Spit it out, Leo asked, his body immediately posturing. They are in the watering hole. So? Leo asked with a tilt of his head. The dry season meant a huge reduction in pastures. Herbivores had to gather near watering holes not only to drink but also to graze there because it was really the only place with green at this time of the year. Therefore, it was not strange that the two rhinos would be in or near a watering hole. They are in the watering hole, Grim said. Leo's face finally had a moment of realization before it morphed into anger and worry. Let's go, Leo said, immediately following Grim. But while most herbivores were gathering near water sources, there was one beast in particular that was very territorial of them. And no, they were not crocodiles. These beasts not only claimed the water but also the surrounding land and the green grass that grew there. The third largest beast in the world. An animal Leo had done a splendid job in avoiding throughout his life. The hippopotamus.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.